Hey guys, welcome to the first episode here of Nuss's Notes. Goal of this podcast series is just to sit down and talk with different coaches of all kinds of sports and just hear a little bit about their background, their life story, how they got into coaching, lessons learned along the way, different philosophy and styles. Just see if there's anything cool to pick up on. My first episode here, sat down and talked to Coach Jim Brown, formerly assistant coach and head coach of Wright State Raiders basketball and Northmont High School, where he was my basketball coach for a couple years. Lots of good stories on here for any of you basketball junkies or Wright State and Northmont fans. Lots of good stories. Talks about some of his best players, best memories, and even a cool story about recruiting Dirk Nowitzki. So here you go. All right, Coach. Thanks for joining me today and let me talk to you. So Belmont High School, right?
Yep.
Belmont High School.
1962.
Nice. Who was? I know you played basketball. Who was your coach?
My coach was John Ross. He became the coach, the head coach my senior year. He was my JV coach when I was a sophomore. He was my JV coach, and then the following year I was on the varsity, and my coach was Skip LaRue, and he retired at the end of my junior year, and John was named the coach. So it was his first head coaching position. It was at Belmont High School, and we had a good team. It was a young team. Bill Hoskett, who played at Ohio State, and Don May, who played at Dayton. Both were sophomores on that team.
Okay.
And we had a good team, but the year after I left, they had a great team, and then the 2 years after I left, they won the state championship.
Yeah.
So, it was my high school experience was enjoyable. We had good teams, and I had a really good coach.
Right. He had a big influence as far as like you wanting to coach?
Well, he did. In fact, what happened years later, I did when John coached basketball at Belmont for 2 years after I left, and then he decided to retire. He retired as a coach 2 years after I left Belmont High School. They won the state championship, and he quit. I mean, he retired and just got out of coaching altogether. And what he did was, because he loved basketball, he started scouting. And at that time, it was perfectly permissible for college coaches to watch teams they were going to play in person.
Oh, okay.
So what he would do is he would get Xavier's schedule and Cincinnati's schedule and Dayton and Miami, and he'd look at their schedule and he'd find schools on their schedule that were a long ways away, and he would approach them about, okay, I'll go scout the team and sell you the report, and it would save them some money because they wouldn't have to come all the way up.
Right.
So that's what he did, and I helped. He asked me. I was that would have been 1967. I was going to graduate school at Xavier. I did some with him then, and then in '68 I was teaching at Belmont High School while I was I had a deferment from the Army. I took ROTC in college, so when I graduated from Dayton, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, and they allowed me to pursue a master's degree for 1 year. And in that year there, I assisted him. In fact, one time, he and his wife and myself and my wife flew to Milwaukee, and there was a tournament up there. It was Florida State, Wisconsin, Marquette, and LSU. And so there were 2 games each night. He took one team, I took the other team, and in that tournament was LSU with Pete Maravich.
I was just going to ask, was Maravich there?
Pete Maravich, and Florida State had Dave Cowens, and Al McGuire was Marquette's coach. It was little did I know at that time the significance of the people that were participating in that. But anyway, he made enough money to pay for my wife and I's airline tickets, our hotel expenses, and I think I got like $200. So he did that for several years, and then eventually became Wright State's first coach.
That's cool. So that's how you got the Wright State connection?
That's how I got the Wright State. As I said earlier, I went to Xavier to get my master's degree, and in 1968, I had to go into the Army. My year delay was up, so I had to go into the Army. I went in the Army in May of '68, and I was at Fort Lee, Virginia, and then I went to Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, and then I got sent to Vietnam. So I was in Vietnam the year of '69 and '70, and it was around Christmas time of '69. I got this letter in the mail from John that he had just been named the head basketball coach at Wright State. They were going to start a basketball program. They'd never had a basketball program. It was a relatively new university, and they were going to start a basketball program, and they named him the coach. And he knew that I was getting home relatively soon, and wanted to know if I would, when I got home, and I would be his assistant coach. And I can remember writing back, because I was in a bad place. I was right on the Cambodian border. We were getting shot at every day.
Right.
And I just said, yeah, if I make it home, I'll be glad to do it. And I was married at the time to the same person I'm married to today. But anyway, I made it home, and 3 days after I was home, I was recruiting a
How about
basketball.
that?
Yeah, it was a strange thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've often wondered many times why John asked me to do it. I mean, because he was a very successful high school coach. He had a lot of good players, and why he asked me to be his assistant coach, I don't know. But anyway, the first couple of years at Wright State, I was part-time. I taught in the Dayton public school system because Wright State didn't have the funds. You know, they were starting. John was part-time. I was part-time. And then they eventually hired me full-time. And even then, I worked in the admissions office. I would call on schools in southwestern Ohio and talk to students about Wright State. And it wasn't until I think the third year I was at Wright State that I became full-time, that I was just full-time athletics and could devote, all my time to athletics.
Which I'm sure was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to go to the different high schools. I mean, I got to meet a lot of people. Actually, was able to recruit a couple kids because of it. You know, because you're going to high schools, you can talk to the basketball coach and whatever. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone. But yeah, it was, you had to drive. My area was all the way down to the Ohio River, so I was in southern Ohio a lot, and then I had to come home and have basketball practice, and you had no time to prepare for practice because you got back to Dayton about 1, and practice was at 3, so it was difficult. And John was the same way. He was calling on student teachers in the morning, and then so it was the first couple of years was difficult.
Did you get to Ironton ever? Like the Ironton?
Oh,
area?
I've been to Ironton. Yeah,
that's where my wife's from. Right around there. Her cousin's the all-time leading scorer there.
Really?
Just recently.
Yeah.
But,
no, it's funny. I'll be someplace and I'll talk to, like, I still teach at Wright State, and I'll have a student in the class and I'll ask them where they're from, and they'll say, "Oh, you've never heard of a coach," and they'll say it, and I say, "Oh yeah, I've been there."
Yeah, she went to South Point High School, but I mean,
South Point High School. Yeah, I know the high school.
That's cool. So Wright State, they were D2 at the time when they started. Is that
right?
It
was called small college at that time. I don't know exactly when. You were kind of lumped into two categories. You're either a large school division. I don't even know if they called them Division I then, John.
Okay.
It was small schools and large schools, and we started our program. We were playing schools like Wilmington and Otterbein and Thomas More and Transylvania and Bellarmine and schools like that. And
so were you non-scholarship?
The first year, we had no scholarships. So it was strictly walk-ons,
Right.
and we played JV teams or freshman teams. Back then, at that time, freshmen were ineligible to play on the varsity. So every college had two teams. They had a freshman team and they had a varsity team.
Yeah.
So that's who we played. We played freshman teams. We played Ohio State, Cincinnati, Dayton, people like that. Then the second year is when I think we were given 4 $500 scholarships.
Okay.
And our first 4 kids that we signed, one was from Piqua, Bill Fote, one was from Centerville, Greg McCurdy, one was from Fairmont, Bill Maris, and the other one was from Belmont High School. Carroll High School, Jimmy Minch, and Belmont High School, Dave McGill. And those were the first 4 recruits, and they all got like $500, and that was the start. I have to tell you a story. This is kind of funny because you talk about, we didn't have a gym. We practiced at Stebbins High School, and of course Stebbins had their own athletic program, so we had to go when everybody was done. So
Right.
Our practices usually started about 9 o'clock at night.
Wow.
There was no food service on Wright State's campus. All we had at Wright State at the time was the student union, which the players lived in, Hamilton Hall. We in one building, so there was nothing there. So it wasn't like you could go back and there would be a meal prepared for you. So,
no, there's no training table,
no,
none of that.
So we had to have sandwiches, cold cut sandwiches fixed. And of course, they would sit in the van. We bust them down. We vanned them down to Stebbins High School, which wasn't all that far, but and then they'd have these sandwiches on the way back. And I can remember getting in the van at 11 o'clock at night, and the thing smelled like a salami sandwich or deli. But anyway, the first year we had tryouts for our basketball team. And now we had been in school for at least 5 or 6 weeks. And we have this tryout. We had about 70 kids try out.
Okay.
And Coach Ross said to me, he says, Coach, go down there and check on that one kid. He says, he's been impressive in our, we had 3 or 4 practices. And so I went down and I introduced myself, and I was getting some information, what his name was, where he went to high school and everything. And then I said to him, I said, well, how many hours are you taking? And he said to me, well, Coach, he says, I actually haven't enrolled in school yet. I was going to see if I made the team first.
Okay.
So those were kind of the things that you had to deal with back then. I mean, it was the first 2 or 3 years was a real challenge because we practiced at Stebbins. We practiced down at the Fairgrounds Coliseum, which has just been sold now, and the University of Dayton bought it. It's right across from Miami Valley Hospital. They have a small arena in there that we practiced in there when we could. But it was difficult. I mean, played mostly games on the road, very few home games because we had to play at Stebbins, and of course it was difficult to get time in Stebbins High School. And then I think it was in 1973 that the university opened up the what was called the PE building, which seated about 2,800, and that's where we practiced and played from then on.
Okay. That must have been a lot better.
Well, it was. And our program was starting to get better. John coached for 5 years, and then he retired and became an assistant athletic director. And our first 2 years, we had losing seasons. I think the first year we won 8 games, and this next year we won 9, and then the third year we won 17. I think we were 17-5. Then we were like 18-7.
Yeah.
And it's clearly we were making an upswing as a program. And John decided again, the program was advancing, and they decided they needed an assistant athletic director, and that position came open. And out of common courtesy, they offered it to John, and he took it. And they hired Marcus Jackson as a coach. They told the new coach, whoever he was going to be, that he had to keep Coach Brown. Why, I don't know, but that was the deal. So Marcus wasn't real happy about that when he took the job, that he had to keep me. And our relationship that first year wasn't the best. But we grew to I mean, I think he recognized my talents that I had, and our last couple of years we were fine, and then he was let go. I mean, he was fired after the 3rd year, and I was offered the job, and it became a real. He was an African American. He felt like he was mistreated. There was a lawsuit filed, and it ended up costing me the job. I mean, they decided, well, look, we better just move in a different direction. If we hire Jim, we're going to lose this lawsuit and everything. Because I think Marcus felt like I had something to do with his firing, which I was shocked that it happened. Mm-hmm. But anyway, what happened then was they hired Ralph Underhill, who was an assistant basketball coach at Tennessee Chattanooga. Mm-hmm. And I knew Ralph a little bit, but very little. And he came to Wright State, and he and I coached together for 18 years. We had a beautiful relationship.
Right.
Won a national championship in 1983. And I think that's the most amazing thing to me is in 13 years, 13 short years, we went from starting a program with no gym, no nothing, to winning a national championship in 13 years. I can't imagine that's happened anyplace else.
No, that's pretty amazing. And was the national championship year like going into it, we've got a chance, we've got a good team, or was it late in the season, you guys?
It was the 2 years prior to that. In 1980-81, we arguably might have had the best team Wright State ever had during that era.
Yeah.
We were ranked number 1 in the country in Division II from the start of the season to the end of the season. I think we had lost a couple games, and at that time, Division II basketball was all about money, and we had a small gym, and teams hosted the tournament. You didn't go to a neutral site; it was always on a participant's home field or home court, and so we had to go all the way out to Western Illinois to play. And we got beat on a buzzer shot. I mean, a guy hit a shot at the buzzer and beat us by a point, and I felt like that was our one shot. And
right.
then 2 years later, again, we had a really good team. I think we started the season 10-0. Then we dropped a couple of games, but I don't know exactly when it was. It was in, I think, late January. We played Kentucky Wesleyan, who was one of our huge rivals. They had been in existence for a lot longer than Wright State. They had a lot of success. They had won national championships. They were like one of the cream of the crop in terms of Division II basketball. And we played them down in their sports arena, which seated about 6,000 people. And every time we played down there, it was full.
Right.
So we're going down there to play. I want to say it's in late January. And we're down 13 points with 3.5 minutes to go. Now, there's no three-point shot at this time.
Okay.
And we get back into the game. So anyway, Wesleyan's shooting a 1-and-1. They're up a point, and they're shooting a 1-and-1, and the kid misses the free throw. There's like 12 seconds to go in the game. And we get the rebound and come down the floor, and arguably our best shooter takes a shot from the top of the key, which would be a three-point shot today, but it was a 2 back then. Misses it. And I'll try to describe this. The ball hit the left side of the rim and took a direct right bounce along the baseline, if you can envision that.
Okay.
And we had a player, for whatever reason, who was running down the court. He reached out with his right hand and just threw it up, and it went in.
No way.
It went in. And we won the game because it was at the buzzer.
Right.
And whatever it did to our team, it just we just got better and better and better. So we had like 16 games left. We won every one of them except we had to go to Louisville. We played Louisville that year down at Louisville. And Louisville was outstanding team. They made it to the Final Four that year themselves. And it was a very competitive game. I think we ended up losing by 12 or 14. It was a very competitive game. But that's the only game we lost. We won our last 16 games except for that one.
Yeah.
And then we went to the tournament. And again, we had to go on a road. We had to go to Kentucky Wesleyan. And we won both games at Kentucky Wesleyan. We beat Lewis University in the first game, and then we beat Kentucky Wesleyan at the buzzer in the regional championship.
Okay.
And then we had to go to Bloomsburg State up in Pennsylvania, and we won that game by 20. So now we go to the National Final Four in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we played Cal State Bakersfield in the first game. It was a very difficult game. We ended up winning by 6. And now we had to play the District of Columbia. They were the defending national champions. They had won like 39 straight games. They had 2 players on their starting lineup that were first-round draft choices in the NBA. Wow. They had Earl Jones, who was 7 foot tall. He was drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers in the first round. He was a senior. They had a junior, Michael Britt, who was drafted the following year in the first round by the Washington Bullets. So,
pretty loaded.
Yeah, they had an outstanding basketball team. And it was a 4-point game at halftime, I think. And with about 12 minutes to go in the game, we had like a 6-point lead. Now, this was before the shot clock. There was no shot clock. There was no 3-point basket.
Right.
And we as coaches, we felt like, okay, how long can this last? I mean, we were up 5 or 6 points. How long can this last? So Coach Underhill, he turns to me and he says, Coach, I want to go to a delay. Well, we had this delay game. We didn't use it very often where we we just ran our offense, but we extended it and didn't want to shoot the ball.
Right.
All we were going to shoot was layups. And I said, Ralph, it's too early. We can't do this. There's too much time. 12 minutes to go. We can't do it.
Right.
It'll break all our momentum. And he didn't say anything. And about a minute later, he says, damn it, Jim, I want to go to a delay game. And I could tell now that he was serious.
Yeah.
And I said, well, okay, let's call timeout. So we called a timeout, and we put into motion what we wanted to do. That we didn't want to stop shooting. We just wanted to. We had this offense we ran. I ran it when I was coaching you at Northmont, called Thumbs Up. We just spread the court, and we just spread the court, and we held the ball for like 2 or 3 minutes, and you could see that they couldn't take it away from us, and their coach panicked. I mean, he absolutely panicked. He starts telling his kids to foul us. And so they start fouling us on purpose, and we ended up winning by 19 points.
Wow.
I mean, it was a brilliant strategic move in hindsight. At the time, it was extremely risky because, when you go to a delay game with a 5 or 6 point lead, you can break all your momentum.
Yeah.
But we were so confident in our team. Our team was playing so well that it was a brilliant strategic move, and we ended up winning by 19 points.
Did you have to do anything on defense, considering you probably never saw a 7-footer?
Well, we played a 1-3-1
Okay.
Zone defense, and we put a man in front of him and a man behind him.
Yeah.
And we, we had a 6'1" point guard. It was a talented team. I mean, we had a 6'5" wing player that could handle it like a point guard. So if we got pressed, we just gave the ball to him, and he brought it up.
Yeah.
We had 7 players. When we subbed at the guard position, actually, we had 8. We had 8 players. We had a backup point guard, backup wing, and a backup inside player. We were very talented.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good basketball team, and they were from all over. One was from Milwaukee. One was from Washington D.C. One was from Louisville. One was Cincinnati. 2 of them were from Dayton, Greenville. One of them was from Greenville. The other one was from Dayton. I mean, and one was from Sydney. So they were, it was a unique basketball team.
Yeah.
And they just got better and better and better as the season went. It was something that's kind of a storybook deal to see that happen right
Sure.
in front of you, because you just wondered when it was going to stop. Well, it never stopped.
Right.
I mean, we just kept getting better and better. And
Yeah.
culminated in a national championship.
That's when it's really fun. Just a couple things like road games. I mean, I did my student coaching, interning at Ohio State, and the home games at the Horseshoe are great, but I always love going like on the road and winning on the road, because when you score a touchdown, it's just quiet.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like when you have a tip in at the buzzer with 6,000 people and you don't hear it, like I always thought that was really cool and like the journey, like in a hotel room or staying with the team and stuff. I always liked road games.
I think winning on the road is the greatest experience in coaching. And I also think, in basketball, it's a little bit more difficult because the crowd is right there. It's right on the floor. I think that's why you see in baseball, I don't think it matters.
No.
I really don't think in baseball that winning on the road is that big of a deal. Football, to your point, football, it is, because you got huge crowds. But basketball, they're right there. And it's very difficult to win on the road. And it's not so much that it hurts you as the road team. It helps the home team, because when they get in a jam, things aren't going well, the crowd can pick them up.
Yeah.
But I've also often thought that it's so much easier to get your players focused on the road, because they don't have to worry about tickets.
Oh my gosh.
They don't have to worry about, this and this and this and this.
Yep.
You have them away from all of that. That doesn't mean that you're going to win, but it's just a lot easier to get your kids focused.
For sure. To close ranks a little bit.
Yeah.
And we always, like home games, you're telling them all week, sign up for your tickets, sign up.
Yeah.
And by Thursday, you're like, God, as a coach, you're like, can we stop talking about tickets and who's coming to the game and everything? Also, no 3-point line and Pete Maravich. So I talk to my uncles all the time, and some of them are of the opinion how like the basketball players from 30 years ago could be the people today, and they always say to average 44 a game in college with no 3-point line, that Pistol Pete did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of because the kid from Oklahoma this year, the Trey Young, he's fantastic. He averaged 27 with a 3-point line.
Yeah.
So throw on 17 more
Yeah,
points.
and that's the closest. Trae Young at Oklahoma is the closest player that I have seen in my lifetime to Pete Maravich.
Really?
Yeah, he's the closest. Pete Maravich was. There's two players that I still teach a coaching class at Wright State, and there's two players that. Well, actually three or four, because in today's society you talk about Shaquille O'Neal, you talk about Michael Jordan, you talk about LeBron James. Well. And when Russell Westbrook was going through his triple-double thing last year, I keep reminding people Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double for his entire career.
Right.
And Wilt Chamberlain averaged 55 points and 27 rebounds in an NBA season.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you talk about records in the NBA, Wilt Chamberlain's name is there someplace. I mean, the guy was incredible. I met Wilt Chamberlain one time, and
No way.
And he's the biggest human being I've ever seen in my life.
Oh,
I mean, it was. I was fortunate. I was a senior in college at Dayton, and my best friend was Henry Finkel, who was on the basketball team, and Henry was 7 foot tall, and back then, the NBA had this territorial draft where if you were in a certain location, that team had rights to you in the draft. Like, that's why Jerry Lucas went to the Cincinnati Royals.
Okay.
That's why Oscar Robertson went to the Cincinnati Royals, because it was a territorial thing.
Right. Oscar, he's from Indiana, right?
And he's
Oscar
from
Robertson.
Indiana,
Yeah.
yes. And so the Royals had first rights to him in the draft. They don't have that anymore.
Right.
But at that time they did. Well, the Philadelphia 76ers had draft rights to Henry Finkel because he was from New Jersey. So anyway, they invited Henry down to the Cincinnati Gardens where the Royals played, and they were playing the 76ers. And after the game, Henry and I got in to go into the locker room and met Wilt Chamberlain. And Henry was 7 foot tall, and my friend, and Wilt Chamberlain dwarfed him. I mean, it was.
Right.
But Pete Maravich was an incredible basketball player. I mean, the things he did.
Right.
I used to have tapes that I would show of things, the things that he would do, and demonstrative type things, where ball handling, and he was just an incredible basketball player. And with the 3-point line, I mean, now he was, like Trae Young, I think was hard to play with. And I think that's what happened to Oklahoma. I think his teammates, I'm not sure how much they enjoyed playing with him. Pete Maravich wasn't the easiest person to play with because he dominated the ball so much. It's interesting. The other day I heard them talking about this year's Final Four, and 3 of the teams, every team but Michigan, has 5 players averaging double figures. And that is so significant when you talk about basketball. It's a team that has one outstanding player is always up against it when you have a team with 5 players. And,
right.
And you saw what happened to Oklahoma and Trae Young. And Pete Maravich never, his team at LSU never had great success. They won games, but I don't think they ever won the Southeastern Conference. And I know they didn't win a national championship when he was there.
Right.
Because a player with that ability, and like Trae Young this year, they just dominate the ball so much.
Yeah.
And when a player dominates the ball, your teammates don't know what you're going to do.
No.
I mean, so there's no offense involved in terms of. So it's just different. It's interesting.
Right. No, it's even like Jordan pre-Scotty and Phil Jackson was averaging like 35.
Yep.
And they didn't win until he averaged like a little bit less.
No, it's always, as a coach, you always are blessed when you have multiple players that can score. I mean, I've always felt, and you played for me, so I used to say this, as a coach you need 8 players. You need a backup point guard, you need a backup wing player, and you need a backup post player. Now, that's ideal. If you have that, that's the ideal situation. A lot of times you don't have that. You might only have 6 players that you can, but the more balance you have, the better basketball team you're going to have.
Right. So I've seen one of your games from Wright State on YouTube all the time with like a classic finish. I don't know. Was it Valparaiso? Is that do I have the right game?
Well, we had in the time that I coached there, probably the most memorable one was we played Xavier.
Okay.
And it was in the tournament. It was in the MCC tournament. Xavier was ranked like 22nd in the country at the time.
Yeah.
We had a decent team, but it wasn't a great team. And to make a long story short, we had battled and battled and battled, and it came down to Xavier had the ball with like 20 seconds to go. Now there was a shot clock and there was a 3-point shot, so this isn't that long ago. And they were trying to stall the ball. They were going to have to take a shot before the game ended, but it wasn't going to be much. It was going to be like 5 or 6 seconds. Yeah. And they made a mistake and committed a turnover. So we had the ball out of bounds with like 6 seconds to go. And we ran a play, and the play worked, but the referee didn't call a foul. We were trying to draw a foul, a charge.
Okay.
Didn't work, so the ball went out of bounds on the sidelines. 1.1 seconds to go. And this is the coolest thing about this whole thing is when we had no timeouts left. So there's 10,000 people at the game. It's at the Nutter Center. And we're yelling at our players, home run, home run, home run. Well, it's a play that we had taught early in the season, hadn't really practiced it.
Yeah.
But you can see on the tape, you can see the players running to their specific positions where they're supposed to be. And one of our guards threw a long pass down. Delmy Harriman caught it at the elbow, turned, shot, swished it, and we won the game, and it was pandemonium.
Right.
That was a memorable game that we won at home. And another time we won a game on a gimmick play, and it was really funny because the other team had scored with 1 second to go. And so we had the ball out of bounds with 1 second to go, and we were down 2 points. And of course, people were leaving like crazy.
Right.
And this friend of mine, we ended up winning the game in overtime. But this friend of mine told me the next time she saw me, she said, "Jim, we left. We left the game." And we're driving home, and I said to my husband, "Turn the radio on. I want to hear what Coach Brown's saying on his postgame show." And they turned it on, and the game was still on. And she turns to her husband, and she says, "Did President Reagan have a speech tonight and the game's delayed?" And so no, it was still going on, and they were shocked. They were just shocked. Well, we ran a pick play and got a charge, and our kid we were in a 1-on-1. He shot 2 free throws, made them, and then we won it in overtime. So,
right.
When you coach 43 years like I had, you're going to have memorable wins and memorable losses. Like
sure.
the one I talked to you earlier about where we lost at the buzzer in 81. We actually had 3 chances to win a national championship, really. That year in 81 where we got beat on a buzzer beater. And then the year in 83 we actually won it. And then 2 years later we had a wide open jump shot from about 12 feet that if we'd have made, we'd have gone back to the Final Four. We missed it and lost the game by a point and didn't go back. But, I mean, there was a period in time there where legitimately could have won it more than once. I mean, I say that. I never really felt that we should have. It's just, you got to be incredibly lucky.
For sure.
You have to be incredible. People talk about, the Final Four, and there's so many things that have to go right for you because it's one and done. I mean, it's not a best of second. Right. It's one and done.
Well, do you feel like in some ways that's like the best way to determine a championship?
Yeah,
okay.
It is. It is. It'd be interesting if the NBA went to a one and done.
Oh my God.
It would be very interesting. I mean,
right.
The football's that way. The NFL, it's not 2 out of 3. It's who shows up that one day. And I understand why the NBA does it. It's a money thing. They make a lot more money. But no, it's and the pressure that you have on you as a mid-major coach. And it's like Loyola's in the Final Four this year. They wouldn't even have had the chance if they hadn't won their conference tournament.
Yeah.
The other 3 schools, Kansas, Michigan, and Villanova, they didn't have to win their league.
No.
Now Kansas did and Villanova did, but Michigan won the tournament, but they didn't win the regular season league.
Right.
So, all 3 of those teams would have got in had they finished second or third.
Yeah, and Loyola, this was like their one chance, and now look at them. And talk about luck. I mean, if Grayson Allen's shot doesn't roll around the hoop 3 times.
I know.
And Duke's got as much talent as anyone.
Yes, they do. They do. And that's just what I mean. I mean, it's you can't have an injury. you can't have one of those days where shots just don't go in, and that's just
a guy gets in early foul trouble.
Yeah, there's so many things that enter into having a championship, and it's extremely difficult. The average fan has no clue.
Right.
I mean, I can remember as a coach, and even in high school, when you got to the tournament at the end of the year, and you have these practices in preparation for the tournament, you have this dilemma.
You just want something to drink. Or...
I'll take a water if you got it. Sure.
You have this dilemma of, I want to practice hard, but I don't want to have an injury.
Yeah.
And so there's a fine line there. And I would always get so daggone nervous in practice, because if you want to scrimmage and have some scrimmages, but then you can't prevent an injury. So it's just luck. I mean, it's just luck. And I've talked to other coaches about this, and the approach is always, you can't change anything. You just got to keep practicing hard, and it's a fine line.
The way the Cavs kind of practiced in the playoffs last year, they said they only did 3-on-3 at most, and that they wore all kinds of like elbow pads and knee pads just to be sure. Because I mean, the NBA playoffs is like a month and a half.
Yeah, it's a drag, and in the NBA, I don't think they really practice that much. I mean, because they play in so many games, they play so many games, they don't actually have practices, and to your point, I mean, a lot of times you don't go 5-on-5. You'll play 3-on-3. You'll play 4-on-4. You'll break it down that way so that you don't. But it was always a concern of mine, is getting an injury, because it can devastate your chances. I mean, just one little sprained ankle or poked eye or whatever.
Right, and sometimes I remember just from our tournament, sometimes there could be a week in between games sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's 4 or 5 practices of, trying to keep your attention.
You always kept your fingers crossed that nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, and by the same token, you want to keep them sharp. Mm-hmm. So there's, you do a lot of shooting. You change your practices once you get to that point in time, but you still got to have a little period of time. And that year we won the national championship. Some of our practices at the end of that season were brutal. I mean, our first team was just playing so well. I mean, they would destroy the second team. And again, you looked at it and you said, this has got to end. I mean, this can't last forever.
Right.
And it did. I mean, it was just one of those magical deals.
Everything's clicking.
Yeah.
So to finish up Wright State, I mean, you became the head coach. Was that like a surprise? How did that come about?
It was really sad how it happened, because the guy I had worked with for all those years, 18 years, Coach Underhill, was arrested at the Myers store near Wright State's campus and accused of shoplifting. And the university, I think in hindsight, Ralph got some bad advice from his attorney. But anyway, the university fired him. The charges he was acquitted of the charges. It went to court, and he was acquitted of the charges and had a settlement with Myers, the store. But anyway, I was named the interim coach. It was an extremely difficult year for me, because a couple things happened that year. We had come off of a pretty good season. We had pretty much our entire team coming back. Vitaly Potapenko was going to come back. But our president at the time, what he did, Vitaly was from the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And when we recruited him, the university allowed us to admit him provisionally based on, the university requires all foreign students to take the TOEFL test. It's a test of English as a foreign language.
Okay.
And a lot of universities don't require it, but Wright State did. I don't know if they do to this day, but they did back then. And they required a score of 500 on the test. And Vitaly had a 495.
Wow.
The president gave him 1 month to get it to a 500, which was very, 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 very unfortunate. So what Vitaly did was say, okay, fine, I'm going to put my name in the draft. And he ended up being a lottery pick. It was a good move on his part. Sure. And then Ralph got arrested, lost his job. So here I am. I'm taking over the program. I don't have Vitaly Potapenko. We were playing arguably the toughest schedule in the history of the program, because we had Vitaly coming back. So we scheduled Kentucky. We scheduled Louisville.
Yeah.
We scheduled 5 Mid-American teams. Zerbiak was at Miami. Gary Trent was at Ohio. It was an extremely difficult schedule.
Patino at Kentucky at the time? Or
yes,
no?
Patino was at Kentucky. And so anyway, I was thrust. I mean, like 2 weeks before the season started, maybe it was even less than that. I was named the head coach, and so it was. And here we are. Our first games at Kentucky. I start 3 freshmen, a sophomore, and a junior, and we won 7 games, but the thing that was remarkable was we were in so many games, and it's reflective of a young basketball team,
right?
That you play well for a while, and then things mistake here, mistake there. So I think we lost 10 games by 7 points or less. We just had a terrible time finishing the deal. But it was a very frustrating year for me because my best coaching friend
going through some stuff
was treated that way, and then I had to go through this schedule, and I didn't feel like I was getting any support from the university. In fact, the athletic director at the time, when I had my interview at the end of the year, it was really, I mean, it was kind of like a who's who of people that applied for the job. I mean, it came down to I was interviewed. Bruce Weber, who's now the coach at Kansas State, he was at Illinois. He was an assistant at Purdue at the time. Dan Dockich, who does a sports shop show, but he was at Indiana with Bobby Knight as a head coach at Bowling Green. He was interviewed. Tom Cream, who was a head coach at Indiana, head coach at Marquette, he was interviewed.
Yeah.
And then the other coach was Frankie Allen from Tennessee State, and Ed Schilling, and who was a high school coach who had gone to Massachusetts with John Calipari for 1 year, and then was an assistant with him with the New Jersey Nets. Anyway, they hired Ed Schilling.
Okay.
And it really, the program really floundered for 6 years, and in some ways, it's never come back to where it was. There was a lot of people were upset because of the way Coach Underhill was treated. There was a lot of people that felt like I should have gotten the job and didn't get it. So there was a lot of Ed walked into a situation. Coach Schilling walked into a situation where there was a lot of non-support, and it was difficult for him too. I'm saying, but that year that I was the head coach was without question the most difficult year. There was a lot of good things that happened, but it was hard to enjoy, because you had all these other things going on, and it just. But there were some games that year where we played really, really well. We played Dayton that year, lost by 7 or 8 points. I mean, it was a tough schedule.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like. Do you remember who was on the Kentucky team? Is that like Allen Houston or a little bit after?
No, Allen Houston wasn't. He didn't go to. He was at Tennessee.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mercer, maybe.
Yeah,
Mercer. What I was
they had won the national championship the year before.
Okay.
Mercer was on that team. We had played them a couple years before that. We played them in '93 and really played them a competitive game. They had Mashburn. I mean, with 4 minutes to go, we were right there. Now, the year that I was the head coach, we played Louisville at Louisville, and at the last television timeout, so it got down. It was under 4 minutes. The score was tied. We were right there.
Yeah,
and it was amazing, and we played an amazing game. And I can remember my approach in that game was let's just go media timeout to media timeout. Let's just try to win. I tried to break it down into 4-minute segments, and it worked because our kids were competitive. We played a zone defense, and we stayed in the game. And here we are, less than 4 minutes to go, and the game is tied. And I'll never forget this. We were in a zone, and Louisville had the ball, and they threw a pass, and we deflected it, and the ball went up and hit the backboard and came down, and it came right down into a Louisville player's hands, a big kid, and he went up, and we fouled him, and he dunked it in the game, and that made it a 3-point game, and we ended up losing by 4, but I was so proud of how our kids played in that game. But that was kind of indicative of the kind of season. I mean, it was just a very
just being right there and then not having the experience.
And there was some, there was some a new coach taking over. My discipline standards were a little bit different than Ralph's, not significantly, but different. And there was some adjustment on their part, and then at the end of that year, a couple kids that I had recruited that were really good players left the program because they were disenchanted, and so it kind of threw Wright State's program into disarray for a while.
Yeah. So then, was it Northmont the next year? Did you have some time off?
Yeah. No? Well, what happened was because of my contract, they had to pay me for a year, so they didn't really have a job for me. They just kind of put me in an office down on the second floor. And Jack Butler, who was one of my assistant coaches, who actually lived in Inglewood. Jack had been a coach at the University of Dayton with Coach Donaher for years, and then Coach Underhill and I hired him as one of our coaches. And Jack lived in Inglewood, and he had noticed that the Northmont coaching job had opened up. And he said, Jim, you need to apply for that. You'd be great. Just what they need. I said, I'm not going to be a high school coach. I'm not. He said, so every day I would come in, he'd say, have you applied yet? Have you applied yet?
Right.
And he just pestered me to death. So finally, I composed a letter, but I didn't send it. I held on to it for a couple of weeks. And then finally, I sent it. And I got a response saying that they had heard through the grapevine that I was interested, but nothing had ever happened. And they just hired a coach like 2 days before they got my letter. So I was fine, and I never even said anything to my wife about applying. So anyway, that was like in May. Well, in July, on a Saturday morning, our phone rings, and my wife answers the phone, and it's Robin Spiller. And she gives the phone to me. She says, Robin Spiller, who's Robin Spiller? And I said, don't worry about it. And so anyway, Robin gets on the phone, and she says, Jim, our coach that we had has left. He's not going to take the job. He's quit. And you had shown interest. I said, yeah, I kind of was interested, but I don't think so at this point. And she said, well, Gene Klaus, who was the principal there, and we went to college together. Gene and I knew each other real well. And then she said, well, Gene would really like you to come out and talk. And I said, well, okay, I'll do that. Because I had a lot of respect for Gene. And so I went out there, and I'd never been to Northmont High School. They had a player on their team by the name of David Diggs, who I was kind of recruiting. But given my situation at Wright State, I wasn't, I was just kind of, okay, if I get the job, then I'll get serious about this again. So I hadn't really talked to David, but I knew he was out there. And so anyway, I'm out there. They offered me the job on the spot. And I said, okay, well, let me think about it. So I was driving home, and I called a longtime friend who was coaching with me also at Wright State by the name of Jim Ayler. Now, Jim was, at that time was in his late 60s, early 70s, and a dear friend and a good coach, and I knew he would be good for this situation. So I called him on the phone on my car, and I told him I had been offered the job at Northmont High School. He said, oh, great, Jimmy. Oh, I'm so happy.
Right, I can see him saying it.
He's going on and on. And then I said, well, listen, Jim, I said, I haven't taken it yet. I'm waiting. I want you to come with me. And the phone was silent. There was no sound whatsoever.
Right.
And it was like an eternity. And I said, are you still there? And I'm thinking. And I said, Jim, I'm serious. And he said, I'll have to think about this. So I said, okay, that's fair. So the next day about noon, he calls me on the phone. He says, when do we get started?
That's awesome.
And that was it. And I took the job. And in hindsight, I was there 16 years. And I teach a coaching class at Wright State. It's a class that's offered in the fall, and it's open to anybody, and it's called basketball theory, but I teach it. The first half of the class I teach about coaching in general, just whether you're a softball coach, volleyball coach, football coach, whatever.
Right.
And then the last half of it I talk about basketball coaching. And in the midst of doing that, I've always one of the things I talk about is how much fun it is, or would be. I'd never experienced this, but how much fun it would be, because I'd gone to some of these schools up north, like Versailles and Marion Local and St. Henry and Fort Recovery, where you go to a game and the entire community supports. It's such a unique situation, because if you grow up in the city like I did in Dayton, you don't experience that. I mean, but you go to a high school game in Fort Recovery, for example, and you'll see before the game, when they're introducing when the teams come out, all the fourth, fifth, third, second graders all be in a line down there. It's just so cool. They all got shirts on, and so I've always talked about how it would be so much fun to coach in that sort of a situation. And then here I was with an opportunity to coach in a similar situation, being not taking the advantage of it. So when I went to Northmont, I didn't realize, I've told many people, if I'd have known how bad it was, I probably wouldn't have taken the job. I took the job because they had David Diggs, and I thought, well, we can win games, got a good player. And when I got out there and they gave me the scorebook, and I'm going through the scorebook, and West Milton, which was a little school just to the north of Northmont, had beaten them by 40 points on their home floor. Oof. I thought, oh my gosh, what have I got myself
Okay, so you mean how bad it was, meaning how little talent?
Yes,
and, okay,
how little talent they had.
Right.
And the program was in disarray. The best player, David Diggs, the rumor was he was leaving, transferring to Chaminade. Their second best player was a kid by the name of Barry. He had already left and gone to Vandalia Butler. So the program was it was in disarray. And so, and I didn't realize that. Nobody had told me that when I was interviewed. They had talked about, there was a player on the team that if I could corral his talents, he could probably play point guard, and stuff like that. But nobody went into. They did tell me about David Diggs,
right?
And so I had a meeting with David right away, and things worked out. And David was he was a joy to coach. Just really a pleasant person. His parents were very supportive, and
I think your career at Marquette, right?
Yeah, he went to Marquette, and we lost our first 5 games. Lost our first 5 games, and in our last scrimmage, we scrimmaged Dunbar. In our last scrimmage, my second best player, a kid by the name of Matt Gardner, he was like 6'6", has a serious knee injury and is lost for the season. So, but we ended up, that team, we lost our first 5 games, and then we went like 10-4 the rest of the year, and I think we finished 11-12. Mm-hmm. And given what had happened, getting off to that bad a start, losing Matt Garner, it was a remarkable season. We beat Trotwood at Trotwood. They had won 39 straight home games. We beat them in double overtime over there. It was a great win for the program.
Was it David's senior year? Okay.
Yeah, I only had David for 1 year.
Right.
I had him for 1 year, and it was that group has stayed together. I mean, it is amazing because just a year ago, one of the players on that team got married, Jason Hess, and there were 8 seniors on that first team I coached at Northmont, and they were all at his wedding. And when my wife and I walked in, Ron Amos, whose son Nick was a junior on that team, came over to me and he said, "Coach Brown," he said, "your ears got to be burning, because for 2 days, all these guys have been talking about is you and their experiences playing for you at Northmont." It was so neat. And
it's certainly satisfying too, right?
Yeah, and all 8 of them were there.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd all stayed friends, and I mean, this is a significant period of time had gone by between, it had all gone their separate ways to college, and here they are, all back in I think one of them might not have been there. I think 7 of the 8 were there, but it was really a neat experience for me to see them again.
Yeah, and then so the next couple of years, I mean, was the program slowly getting better?
Yeah. Well, when the first thing I did when I got out there is I said to myself, I've got to get young kids interested in basketball. So I started a basketball camp, and I made a conscientious effort to get involved with the 7th and 8th grade teams. I don't have any idea. Well, the first thing I did was I told my 7th and 8th grade coaches, and I met with some resistance on this, but I stood my ground, was that we were going to divide the teams. Each there was one 7th grade, but they had two 7th grade teams.
Right.
They had two
Yep.
8th grade teams. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to, previously they would put their, what they felt like was their 12 best players on team A and
Right.
the next players on. And I said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have a draft. And the first coach can pick the best point guard, and then the next coach gets to pick the best big man, and then the next coach picks it. And so the best big man and the best point guard are on opposite teams, and the second best point guard and the second best big man are on opposite teams. So,
Yeah.
and oh my God, you would have thought I was.
Yeah, the
we'll
world
never
ended
win
or
a
something.
game. We'll never win a game. And the parents, it wasn't the parents. I mean, the coaches, at least most of them, 3 of the 4 were behind me 100%. One of them kind of rebelled against it, but and it worked. I mean, I think 3 years after we did it, we won a championship. I mean, we won several championships during my years there in the 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah.
But we were always competitive. I mean,
Yeah.
we never, won like 1 game or 2 games. But my
Right.
point is I need to, because this is the future. This is the future. And so if I'm going to stay here for a while, and everybody thought I was going to be there 1 year and leave, 2 years and leave.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard-
Well, understandable.
I heard
from
that
there.
all the
Yeah.
time, and it was hard for me to convince them that I have no desire to go back. I had coached 27 years in college. Well, I've done that. So
Right.
anyway, and it worked because I've thought many times about some of those players the later years. I had them in camp, and like you and Steve Newell and Alex Jones.
Right.
I mean, guys that had come to basketball camp when they were 4th graders, 3rd graders. I can remember you and your dad coming up when I'm practicing shooting in the gym.
Yeah.
I mean,
I always appreciate you letting me do that.
I mean, it was those were cool times, and
Well, you got to keep as many kids interested in playing as you can, because I mean, how many kids peak when they're in 6th grade, and then how many, like, I was better in high school than I was in elementary school.
Basketball's a skill game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very difficult game for a young kid to play, particularly 5th, 6th, and 7th. And I insisted that my 7th grade and 8th grade coaches played everybody. In fact, I told them, I said, I want everybody on our team to start 2 games. I didn't check on them. I didn't go down there and make sure they were doing it, but I went to as many games as I could because I wanted to be visible. I wanted those kids, I mean, I didn't care if they played other sports. I just wanted to make sure they stuck with basketball.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that can happen to you is you're on a 7th grade basketball team and the coach never plays you, and you get disenchanted and you give it up. And I always tell the story to my coaching class, until your score is in the Daily News or on Channel 2, it doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. I learned, I was one of these guys as a young coach that felt like, every game was important. And I can remember I was coaching my youngest son, Anthony. I was coaching his baseball team. And he was like 11 years old, 10 years old. And we're playing a game, and I got 3 kids sitting on the bench, and my team's out in the field, and these kids are throwing rocks against the fence, and they're not paying any attention to the game.
None.
And I turned to them and I said, guys, I'll bet you don't know what the score is. No, we don't know what the score. I'll bet you don't even know who's ahead. No, I think we are, but I don't know. I said, look, you got to pay. I admonished them. I said, you got to pay attention. You're going to get in the game. You got to know what's going on. And I was kind of angry. And so it wasn't 2 minutes. The one kid says to me, Coach Brown, do you think the woman that's bringing the snacks for after
No doubt.
is here?
They're worried about the snacks
So
afterward.
it was like an awakening for me. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh,
Right.
that's what's important to
Yeah.
those kids. It's not whether we're ahead,
Yeah.
And so I really preach that when I'm teaching my coaching classes, that your goal as a young coach, and this is where we've gone totally wrong as a society, is to keep kids interested, not to win games. Keep kids interested. I get so upset when they have these AAU teams for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th graders, and they allow full court pressing. And the only reason they allow full court pressing is so that they can win games. It's not, if a 4th grader doesn't have to know how to press. A 5th grader doesn't know how. I mean, it's just because they can't handle the ball, so we'll steal the ball, we'll make a layup. I mean, it's not good. I mean, it's just not a good situation.
Right.
And but that's what that's what young kids are dealing with today. And so a lot of kids, I'm sure, give the game up because they have a coach. Like I have a little neighbor boy here where I live, and he's in the 7th grade, and I went to one of his games, and his dad got there a little late, and his dad says to me, well, has Charlie been in the game? I said, yeah, he's been in, he's played some, and he says, well, Charlie's the only one that gets in the game. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the starters and Charlie are really the only ones that ever play.
Wow.
I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, Jim, no. And see, that is so sad because you have 5 or 6 kids that are 7th graders who are trying to decide what sport they're going to, and they're not ever getting to play. Well, what's going to happen? They're going to give the game up.
They're going to stop. Right.
And I always tell the story about the Chicago Bulls won 6 World Championships, and they had 3 players on their team. They had Michael Jordan. Everybody knows Michael Jordan got cut as a freshman in high school. Okay, so what? He got cut as a freshman in high school.
Right.
Scottie Pippen, who was voted one of the 50 best players of all time, went to Central Arkansas as a basketball manager. Didn't go as a manager. Didn't go as a scholarship player.
Right.
Didn't go he went as a basketball manager. And then Dennis Rodman. I mean, what can you say about Dennis Rodman? He went to Oklahoma A&M. But my point is here you have 3 players who have unique backgrounds, and they were extremely good professional basketball players.
Yeah.
And if they'd have had a coach in the 7th grade that didn't play them, who knows? Giving the game up.
Right.
So I think you have a tremendous responsibility if you're going to coach youth kids in any sport that that they have an opportunity to have a good experience.
I think so too. And there are some parents who we can't miss anything. We can't. And if I were to advise a parent now, if you have a vacation, miss a 7th grade baseball game, or miss it, go on vacation at the same time. It's not. Yeah. It's you say just play when you can. And
I think back to when I was in the 7th grade, and I can remember I had a coach in the 7th grade who was fun. He made basketball fun.
Yeah.
I mean, he just made basketball so much fun. And my dad was a coach, but I don't really remember. My dad gave up coaching when I was like 6 years old, so I don't really remember. And he wasn't anybody that insisted that I play. I've always felt that as an athlete, you have to develop a passion for playing. And I used to talk about this all the time. If you got a headache, you take an aspirin. Well, if you want to be a good basketball player, you have to have basketball passion, and you can't go to Walmart and buy a basketball passion pill. It's something that
you got to work.
It's got to be developed.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody likes to play the game, but how many players like to practice the things they don't do well? And you see it today. I mean, you see it so often today. You used to get so frustrated when I was growing up. You were a guard. Okay, you handled the ball or you shot the ball. You were a guard. Now we have this thing called the point guard, and so it's a hard position to play. So nobody wants to work on the skills to get good enough. So they go and they're the shooting guard, and they can't be the point guard. And so it's just something that has manifested itself today. Whereas if kids would just learn the proper skills, fundamentals. I mean, it's and if I was a young kid, I'd love AAU basketball because all you do is play.
That's it.
But as a coach has been through it, I see the pitfalls that you run into. I always used to compare AAU basketball to a hot fudge sundae. And I know what are you talking about, Jim? But I always would say this: you put ice cream in a bowl, it's really good. You don't have to put anything on it. It's good.
Yeah.
You put chocolate syrup on top of it. It's really good. And that's the chocolate syrup is AAU basketball.
Okay.
The ice cream are the fundamentals.
Yeah.
If you just pour your chocolate syrup in the bowl and just eat the chocolate syrup, That's going to make you sick. That's not going to be very
No.
good. So if all you do is play AAU and you don't work on the fundamentals, it's not going to work out.
I mean, I still remember your story from camp, or example, I guess, of let's say you drove an hour to AAU, drove an hour back, and you're at the game and you played 20 minutes. You probably got 4 shots off.
Yeah.
So in the total time of 3 hours you could have stayed at home, how many shots do you get off? And I think it's great to play. I just went, Alex's younger brother's in 7th grade, and he does AAU. Basketball's the only sport he plays, so I got to see him play. And, I mean, it's fun. Like, at the same time, I'm like, man, I wish I could play basketball all the time, but there's no coaching going on.
No,
I mean, from what I saw.
The thing about, like, my youngest son knows how I feel about AAU. And so I got a phone call about a month ago from him. He said, Dad, I got a question. And I said, okay. He says, well, I'm thinking about allowing Jaden to play AAU basketball, but I want to know what you think. And I said, well, you know what I think. I said, I don't have any problem with Jaden playing AAU basketball as long as you control where he goes. If he's going to go to Louisville for a tournament, if he's going to go to Indianapolis for a tournament, I'm not in favor of that as a 7th grader or 6th grader. He's a 6th grader.
Wow.
If it's going to be, he's going to go to Centerville, or he's going to go to Vandalia, or he's going to go locally. Yeah. I think that's fine. Maybe one time to Columbus or whatever. And I said, doesn't he play lacrosse? And he said, yeah, but he's not going to miss any lacrosse things. He's just only going to do the AAU when it doesn't conflict. And I said, I think that's fine. And I said, here's the thing. I said, AAU is all offense, and Jaden needs offense. He needs to Jaden's the kind of young player that he passes first and shoots second. So he needs to develop a little bit more confidence offensively. So I told him, I said, AAU basketball will help him in that respect because it's all offense. It's all offense. So it has its value. I mean, there's no question that AAU there's some good. And then once you get into high school, I think it helps you with exposure.
Yeah.
And regardless of where you are, it helps you with exposure.
Well, that's what, I mean, being at Purdue and talking with basketball coaches, I mean, a college basketball coach rarely gets to a high school game during the season because they got their own season and they're recruiting like where football. Yeah, exactly.
And that always was a dilemma because the AAU summer league is so different than the regular season because he's not playing with the kids he grew up with. He's playing with kids, and there's no defense being played. And I've always felt like the best time to evaluate a player is when he's playing with his own coach and his own players. But you can't do that. I mean, you as a college coach. But what's happened today is kids are making commitments so early that like I was at Wright State yesterday, and the women's coach was taking a recruit around, and she's a sophomore in high school. It was the women's coach was taking a recruit around. She's a sophomore in high school. When I was at Wright State, we never had the liberty to do that. I mean, that was out of the question. You just didn't have. You just didn't have the wherewithal to bring in sophomores. You had to, you were more, working with juniors or seniors.
Yeah.
It's just different.
It's so different. It's so different. I think you said a couple minutes ago was showing up to the middle school games. I always remembered you being in the front row coming to middle school games. And even my parent, like my dad after the game, he said, you may not understand this, but it's a big deal that Coach Brown like showing up to your games. He said that's really cool that he's building the program that way. And
well, I think you have to do that, and it's like going back to this situation here, where across the street, the young man, the varsity coach hadn't been to one game all year. Because I asked, I said, "Does the varsity coach ever come?" See that I think as a high school coach, you have a couple of responsibilities. One is you need to win games. But you've got to develop players too. You've got to develop their talent. If they have the potential to play college basketball, you've got to develop that.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody's going to have it. You may not have anybody on your team that has that ability. But if you do, it's your responsibility to develop. The other thing is it's your responsibility to make sure they understand the academic part of the deal, where, what they take as a freshman and sophomore is going to impact them when they get to be a senior academically if they don't do well. And I think that's part of your responsibility too. So, a high school basketball coach, it's a lot more than just watching your kids practice and play. I mean, there's so many other responsibilities you have. And getting back to what your point is I always felt like, and Lance Snyder, who was the football coach at Northmont when I was there, he always said, "I want the best athletes in the school playing football." I mean, that was his philosophy, and I share that. Now, basketball is different than football because basketball is such a skill game. I mean, in football, really the only position that is really a skill position, in my view, is quarterback. And that's you play quarterback. That's a difficult position, maybe the most difficult position of all the sports to play.
Yeah,
is the quarterback position. But if you're a wide receiver, you run to a spot and you make a cut. If you're a running back, I think there's some skill involved in being a running back, no doubt. But as a lineman or as a wide receiver or as a defensive player, it's limited. But as a basketball player, you got to take this ball, you got to shoot it at a 10-foot basket, you got to be able to handle it with somebody else. It's a skill game. I mean, it's a very difficult game for young players to play. And so, as a high school coach, if you don't show interest in those young kids, they'll just find something else to do.
Yeah,
they have too many other things.
There's plenty of options.
Yeah, plenty of them. More so now than ever's been. I mean, some good, some bad.
Right. Distractions, as some people would call them. There's a couple specific teams. I know you said you have trouble remembering, the years, but you remember the players. There's a couple Northern ones that, to me, are these are some of your great teams. So, 2001, you've got, if I can get the starting lineup right, Brzezinski, Ramsey, Hess. Who's the other? Oh, Pat Masters. Yep. And then Alex Jones was a sophomore, I think. And I remember we went to the same church as the Hesses. And I remember before that season, Zach's like, we're going to be really good. And we've got a sophomore point guard who's really good.
Yeah. No, that was a really good, I've always had tremendous respect for Pat Masters, Danny Brzezinski, Jason Hess, and Ben Ramsey. In fact, I still am in contact with all four of those guys. And the reason I say that is because when I went to Northmont, the program was in disarray. I mean, there was a lot of infighting going on. There was a lot of disenchantment with the previous coach, and they won 4 games, and those guys were all 8th graders. When I got the job, they were all 8th graders, and I tried to change the attitude, the environment. Because I felt like, this program hasn't had any success for a while. And in fact, when I went there and I looked at their previous records, only twice in the history of the school they had 3 consecutive winning seasons.
Wow.
Twice. And we had 14 consecutive winning seasons. The last 14 years I was there, we had winning seasons. I think I'm the proudest of that, of everything that I accomplished at Northmont. That thing is to have that kind of success for that long a period of time that's hard to do in high school basketball. And the only way you can do it is to get young kids interested in the sport. But those 4 guys bought into what Coach Ayler and I were trying to do. I mean, they really bought into it. And they were, they were good. I mean, we made it all the way to the district championship game and got beaten in a close game by Springfield South.
Yeah.
And
20-4 in the year. I'm looking at it. Yeah.
It was a fun year. I mean, but those guys. I think 2 of our losses were to Trotwood that year, and I think they might have both been in. One was in. They were both close games.
I think they're both by 2 points. Looking at it, So you're 24, but could have been easily 22 and 2.
It was a good team. It was really a good team. And we didn't have. Our tallest player was Zach Hess, who was 6'2". Danny Brzezinski was a solid point guard. Ben Ramsey was very athletic, could shoot the ball. It was just a fun team. I mean, they were fun to coach and fun to be around. But the thing the reason I always have a softness in my heart for them is they bought into what we were trying to do as a basketball.
And it's so important to get that early, and they kind of can set a standard at least,
that's what I mean, they got people interested in basketball again at Northmont High School because of how they played and the commitment they made. They got Northmont basketball back on the map, and I think they were 8th graders when I went there, and so we had a losing season when they were freshmen. But boy, from that point on, then it took off. From their sophomore years on, we were competitive the whole way through.
Yeah, well, 2 years later, another really good team when Alex was a senior. You have Corey Bailey.
Yeah.
Brendan Haney was a junior, I think.
Yeah.
I forget the rest of the starting
Oh, we had a
lineup,
really
but-
good team, and unfortunately, we lost the first game of the tournament.
Yeah.
We played at the Nutter Center, and it was a snow day. We didn't have any school.
Right.
And it just messed us all up. I mean, Alex had one of the worst games he'd ever had in his life. I think he had 10 turnovers. I mean, he just had a terrible, terrible game. And we lost. I think we might have lost to Tecumseh.
Yeah.
And I think that's who we lost to.
Yeah.
And it was a close game, and it was very frustrating because that team had tremendous potential. And it was a really good team. I mean, Corey Bailey and Alex Jones were excellent guards, and Brendan Heady went to Eastern Kentucky to play basketball. So it was a really good basketball
Yeah,
team.
well, I mean, you won 14 of the first 15 games. The one loss being a 1-point game to South.
Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, looking at it. And then I remember Blade Vandalia when they had 2 7-footers. And I was in 7th grade. I remember like tickets sold out like within 10 minutes. We got them, and I was there. I remember. I don't know how much you remember about the game. I think it was close the whole time.
It was sold out.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple of things about that game. There was a turning point late in the game where the score was tied, I believe, and Alex Jones and Goldsberry, John Goldsberry, got into it. I can't remember exactly whether Goldsberry took a charge. I think that's what happened. Is Goldsberry took a charge, and it was on Alex, and Alex was laying on the floor. And Goldsberry stood right over the top of him, and Alex pushed him. And Goldsberry said something to Alex.
I'm sure.
Yeah, he did. He said, I know exactly what he said. I'm not going to say what he said, but it wasn't very nice. And Alex pushed him, and they called a technical foul on Alex. And it changed. There was only like 2 minutes to go in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they shot the free throw, and then they went down and scored, and that was it. We got beat, but it was a classic. It was a classic atmosphere.
For sure.
The place was packed, and
yeah.
I mean, it was so funny because when I was coaching at Wright State, I never had the occasion to go to a Vandalia Butler game. I never felt like they had anybody that was good enough to play Division I basketball at Wright State. And then I go to Northmont, and all of a sudden they got these 2 7-footers.
Right.
They got John Goldsberry. I mean,
some really good teams.
Really good teams.
Yeah.
And I had to, but we had, we beat them a couple times. I mean, we were able to, we beat them a couple times at home. And I remember one game went overtime, and Zawadzki got the tip. He was the coach at Vandalia Butler and held it the entire 4 minutes. And finally took a shot with the buzzer sounded, and Brian Boykin, little skinny kid I had that played center, he's about 6'4", he blocked the shot up into the bleachers.
Nice.
And then we won it in the double overtime. But I mean, we had some great confrontations.
Yeah,
I mean,
some really good battles.
And Northmont and Butler hated each other. I mean, they just didn't like each other. It was funny. I mean, Trotwood was actually more of a rival because they were always good, but Butler in that stretch right there was really good.
Yeah,
they were very, very good.
Yeah, I always loved playing at their gym too. The SAC. I mean, they had some really good teams.
I've been to a couple of Butler games just recently because the coach over there now is a former Wright State coach, so I try to get to a couple of these games. And every time I go in there, I think about a couple of those games where we played in there and the place was packed. And you tell people that today, and they say, "Oh, come on!" It was quite an atmosphere.
Yeah,
it hadn't been that long ago either. I mean that occurred. I mean, it's different. I can remember in the early 70s, I had recruited 2 players from Roosevelt High School, which is not a high school anymore.
I'm about to say,
Roosevelt High School was on West 3rd Street, and they had a great basketball team. And I had recruited 2 players that were coming to Wright State off that team, and then Bob Schaefer played for Alter, and he came to Wright State. Anyway, they were playing in the district championship game at UD Arena, and there was 12,500 people at the game.
Wow.
A high school basketball game on a Saturday afternoon. 12,500 people at the game. Now, they can't even get 12,000 people to the state championship games now.
No?
I mean, it's just different. I mean, there's just too many other too many other ways to watch basketball. You
Right.
know, it's not the same. But
Yeah.
that's that I can remember. I mean, my oldest son was about 1.5, 2 years old at the time, so it's been 40 years ago. But
Right.
I mean, at one time, that's how big it was in this city.
The high school game I know was when LeBron was a senior. He played altar at the arena. I remember that being sold out.
Yeah, yeah.
I was in 8th grade, I think. And,
Yeah, but I just checked the state championship this year. I think it was less than 12,000 at the game. It was like 10,000.
Wow.
At the Division I championship game. Now,
that's surprising.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of gone down in attendance each and every year. It's just the way it is. It's just harder to, you go to high school games. It's just not. Now you go up to St. Henry and Marion Local and some of those places, you'll see good crowds.
The whole town,
but,
yeah.
I do games on radio for a Piqua radio station, high school games when I can, and it's rarely that you see a huge crowd.
Yeah.
Rare. It's just really rare. It's not the same.
Right. So the last team a couple years later happened to be my senior year, the 2008 team, and I know we set the record for most wins in a season. What kind of stands out to you about that group of players?
I think I kept 9 seniors.
I think
Yeah,
so.
8 or 9, and that's always a dilemma when you do that because I'm pretty sure it was 9. I'd have trouble remembering every one of their names, but I mean, Brandon Petty was on that team. Moore, what was his
Kevin.
name? Kevin.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a good basketball team with a lot of depth. We had a 6'8" center. We had some kids that could shoot.
Yeah.
It was a good point guard play. Yeah, it was a fun team and a great season. The thing I remember about that season though was the 6'8" young man becoming academically ineligible on senior night. How embarrassing that was for his mom and him, and it ended up costing us an outright championship because we went up and played Sydney, a team we should have handled easily and got beat.
Right. Yeah. Still remember. But yeah, I just remember, like you said, very deep and like competitive. I think our practices sometimes were as competitive as the games. Sometimes, I mean, our second unit of myself, CJ Barnett.
He was on that team.
Yeah, Logan Paulsgrove and Nate and Kevin. I mean, very competitive and just, love to practice and very unselfish. Like the whole team, really. We had probably a different leading score every other game almost.
Geronte Hunter was on that team.
I think Jelly was really good.
Yeah,
he was a very good player.
Yeah, no, it was a fun team, and when you keep 9 seniors, your concern is how's it going to be when you get into your season and people aren't playing as much as, and so that was a concern. But we never had one issue that, from the coaching standpoint, that there were a couple of times where kids didn't get to play as much as they thought, and mom and dad got a little upset, I guess.
Sure.
But it
comes with the territory.
Yeah, it was a really enjoyable season until right at the end.
Right.
And then that team. Didn't we play St. X in the
district final?
Yeah, district final. That was
didn't work out.
No.
Chose a bad time to play our worst game. But are there with those like kind of 3 teams who had very good records? Is there any similarities? Any kind of characteristics that kind of weave their way in through, or is it all just kind of different teams, different personalities?
Well, those 3 teams stand out. I mean, there's no question. The last team I coached there was a good team. We won 18-7. Got beaten the district championship game by Springboro, but that was a good team. It was when I took the job at Northmont, a lot of my friends told me I was crazy. Parents will drive you nuts. It's this and that, and I can honestly say it was a great experience. I had a lot of fun. The players I coached, people have asked me many times what was the difference between high school and college coaching kids, and they're really no different. The high school kids, I think, you had to deal with kids playing other sports, and at times that was very frustrating because you didn't get to you didn't, in college you have them year round. And of course, when I was a college coach, there were limitations on what you could do with your players in the off season. There aren't any restrictions now. You can do whatever you want pretty much now. But when I was at the college level, there were restrictions. And there were certainly restrictions in high school. And so I had to, particularly football. There were a lot, like you played football. I had a lot of kids that played football and also played basketball. And that was an adjustment for me to deal with that. But I just, I had some really, really good experiences. Probably the one experience that, when I think about my time at Northmont, and this is storybook. I mean, this is just what how this happened is beyond imagination. But I had this young man, his name was Andy Kanapke, and Andy played freshman basketball. He was on the freshman basketball team, and he also played baseball. Well, he was born with a deficiency in terms of he had hearing in only one ear, and so when his parents told me that when I talked with him, as long as I looked right at him, he would understand what I said. And he could hear, but it was he had a problem hearing. So anyway, he was playing shortstop on the baseball team as a freshman, and he took a ground ball and it took a bad bounce and hit him in the head. And it didn't do any damage, but the doctors told the parents that, if he continued to play sports, it could impact, he could have a blow to the head, he could lose hearing altogether. And so he gave up sports. He just gave up playing sports. And I talked him into becoming my basketball manager. So he was my manager in my sophomore year, his junior year, and his senior year. So he gets to be a senior, and it's the last week of the season, and we're going to have senior night. And I got this idea that I'd like to dress Andy and put him in the game and start him. And so I did. I had to run it by his parents, and they were okay with it as long as I didn't play him I said, well, how about 2 minutes? They said, that's fine. Right. So anyway, as you know, he started, the student body was just, but there were all kinds of signs. It was just a really, really neat evening. So we were playing Fairmont, and I had told the other coach, who was a good friend of mine, what I was going to do, that I was going to start Andy, and he was a basketball manager, and this was senior night and everything. And he said, oh, that's fine, Jim. So anyway, the game starts, and we're, of course, trying to get Andy a shot. We're trying to run a play for him, and Fairmont is just, every time he touches it, they're double teaming him, and he can't get a shot off, and so I'm running out of time because my 2 minutes is about up. In fact, I think I went over the 2 minutes, and finally Andy, he catches the ball, and he's frustrated too, and he's a good 30 feet away, and he fires it up, and it swishes.
Right, of course.
It was the most incredible. I still have a picture of it up in my office of Andy coming off the floor. And you can see in the picture his parents are in the picture behind with their hands. It was just a really, really cool evening. And you just can't, you can't plan something.
You can't plan it. You just got to hope it goes right.
Well, yeah. What are the chances of it
going in?
Yeah. What are the chances?
Right. Yeah. If he bricks it, it's not as cool.
It was from 30 feet. He had a hand in his face.
Yeah.
One of the TV stations did a story on it because they found out about it later on, and they did a thing on it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. That was one of the highlights of my. That really is right in the top 2 or 3 because that was just an incredible event. It was just you hear about these things happening somewhere with down children, or they're a manager and they get in the game and they score a basket or whatever. It was just so neat for Andy.
That's really cool. Well, speaking of that, I have reached out to some former players and asked them for some Q&A for you. So Brian Toll, fellow classmate, he has top 3 memorable moments / wins. Obviously, that being one of them.
Well, that would be right up there.
Yeah.
I think the first year I coached there when we beat Trotwood at Trotwood, Jason Hess banked in a 3-pointer to win the game in double overtime. And it was a bank shot from 3 feet,
right?
From 30 feet. Just a total throw as the buzzer was going off. That game would be very memorable. As to a third game, that's a hard one to. There were so many of them
Right.
that I mean we had some battles with Trotwood. Some we won, some we lost. Those games that we talked about at Vandalia Butler.
Yeah.
They.
I remember one, my freshman year, so this is Kenny Hayes and JT Thompson's senior year, you had a weekend where you played Springfield South, who was maybe number 2 or 4 in the state.
Yeah.
And I had class with Andrew at the time. He said, man, we played the number 4 team in the state Friday, and then on Sunday we played the number 2 team in the state. You played Toledo St. John's, who had B.J. Raymond went to Xavier.
Yeah.
And I remember the Springfield South, you played at South.
Lost by 30.
Lost by like 30s. Yeah.
Oh, it was terrible.
And they said you spent like an hour in the locker room
Well,
afterwards.
it wasn't
or
an
something.
hour,
Okay,
it
it must have felt like it.
Yeah,
or
it was a long, long time, and I didn't. It wasn't a rant raving speech. I mean, I just I was so frustrated because we played so poorly. We had a good team. We had a really good team.
Those were 2 good guards.
Yeah, Kenny Hayes and JT Thompson, and we just laid a tremendous egg. And then we had one day off, and we came back and played Toledo St. John's on a Sunday afternoon. And you're right, they had B.J. Raymonds that went to Xavier. They had a kid, I don't know his first name, his last name was Heileman. He went to Notre Dame, was a 2-year starter at Notre Dame.
Right.
Our point guard went to Toledo. And we totally controlled it. We played them on a Sunday afternoon. We totally controlled the game, just totally. And I've said many times, Kenny Hayes, who's had a phenomenal career over in Europe, is doing really, really well for himself financially and everything else. He scored 4 points in that game, and he was the best player on the floor. He was absolutely the best player on the floor. He totally controlled the game. We played a zone defense. We totally stymied Toledo St. John's, and JT Thompson hit 2 or 3 big threes.
Right.
And after the game, I felt I apologized to the other coach because I couldn't believe how we were able to lose a game by 38 and come back 2 days later and play like that.
Right.
You don't have to apologize to me, Coach. You guys were unbelievable today, and we were. I mean, it was, and that would be maybe the most memorable one I had, because how do you, as a coach sometimes, and I can't remember what I said to the players, but I know I was in the locker room a long time. In fact, my wife really got on me after, because she had to stand out there and wait for it, and it was at South, so the bus driver, I mean, held a lot of people up, and but anyway, 2 days later they came back and played, and I know those guys that had to be the highlight of their high school career
for sure
to win that game after getting beat so bad. And that South team was really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
Nate Miller, I think, was
Nate
on the
Miller,
team.
And Isaiah Carson, the coach at Springfield South now, or Springfield High School now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it just got out of hand. I mean, we played okay early, but then it just got away from us.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare.
I remember you said that gym was a tough place to play too. The old South gym.
Very
We played there
difficult.
once when my senior year, and they weren't quite as good, but I remember talking with Coach Taylor before the season, like, our schedule's pretty favorable, and he circled like I think 2 games, and one of them was at South.
Yeah. Well, what made South's gym tough was the players.
Yeah. Okay. True.
They always had really good players.
Yeah.
And, it made it tough, but it wasn't tough because it only had, as I recall, it had bleachers only on maybe one side. One side might have not had very many, but anyway, it was a tough place.
Yeah.
But they had good players. They really had good players.
Another question Brian had, and so did I. Could you name off the top of your head maybe the top 5 like opponents you played, as far as like high school, like players in high school?
Players.
I'm sure you could go deeper than 5.
Well, John Goldsberry was really good.
Yeah.
There were Chris Wright at Trotwood would be on that list.
Yeah.
He was very good. They weren't, maybe they were just hard to defend. Gorney and Higgins at Butler were just hard to defend. I mean, they were really difficult to defend. And I can't remember this kid's name, but that night that we got beat up there at Sydney, he scored like 40 points. Was that the year that you were a senior that we got?
We lost by 5 in Type 1.
Okay, maybe it was the following year. There was a player that he had his career game. I mean, he just had his career game. But those guys come to mind. Now, Nate Miller was very good at South.
Yeah.
Trotwood always had a bunch of good players.
Right. I tried to rack my brain of who you like. Did you play against Brooks Hall? Was he at Troy at the
time?
Yeah.
Brooks Hall, and then there was another guy at Troy.
Terwilliger, the center with the Ohio State.
Yeah, but then there was one before him. There was this guy that came from Puerto Rico.
Carmona or something?
Yeah, Carmona. Yeah. That was one of the great games that I was ever involved with. We played them at Troy Hobart Arena. It was packed, huge crowd. That was when Masters and Brzezinski, and it was a tie game, and we had the ball to bounce in front of our bench with like 12 seconds to go, and we ran a play and made a basket and won the game at the buzzer. I think Brzezinski made a basket off of a pick and roll. But Carmona only was there 1 year.
Yeah.
No, I played against Brooks Hall probably at least 2 years, maybe 3.
Okay. Did he win Mr. Basketball in Ohio?
He might have. They had another player on that team that transferred from Wayne, Hargrove. And then in my last years at Wayne, in my last years at Northmont, Wayne they had the Wagner kid that went to Iowa. They had the kid that went to Dayton.
Zarius Williams?
Yeah, no, not Zarius Williams. It was before him. Maybe he didn't go to Dayton, but they had a really good team the last year. In fact, that was a great win because that was my last year at Northmont. We played them over there. It was on senior night. They'd only lost 1 game, and we beat them. On their court on senior night. That was when Keith Richardson. But maybe the most spectacular win we ever had at Northmont was we played down at Centerville. We were down 5 points with 5.1 seconds to go. We were down 5 points, and we had the ball out of bounds on our own basket, and we made a 2-point basket, and then we stole the end. We didn't steal the inbounds pass. Centerville missed a couple free throws. But anyway, to make a long story short, we won in double overtime. But we sent the game from regulation into the first overtime by making 3 free throws with no time on the clock. We got fouled at the buzzer. Devon Carter got fouled on a 3-point shot at the buzzer, made all 3 free throws. And then at the end of the first overtime, we hit a 3-pointer at the buzzer, descended into the second overtime. And then at the end of the second overtime, we're down 2 points, and they're shooting 2 free throws. They miss, then there's like 2.1 seconds to go. They miss the first, miss the second. We get the rebound and call timeout.
Yeah.
So we have the ball out of bounds we have to go the length of the floor.
Okay.
So we run a play, and Devon Carter hits a half-court shot to win the game.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty, to almost lose it a couple times.
You can actually see that on YouTube. If you Google Northmont Centerville buzzer beater, it's on YouTube. And it was a remarkable, and it was just a remarkable game. And you see when Devon Carter makes it was on the other side of the half court. And when he makes the shot, he runs straight to the locker.
Yeah.
He just runs straight to
in.
It is priceless.
Yeah.
But those are some games. If I had time to think about it, there's probably more.
Right. Remember a couple other players. I remember the Tillman kid from Beaver Creek here was really good, hard to handle.
Good guarding. Couldn't guard him. And then there was a kid from Centerville, a little 6'4" guy that went down to East Tennessee State. I can't remember his name.
Oh man.
But he was
Gorney.
Yeah, he was so good.
Yeah.
He was just so. He was one of those 6'4", 6'5" guys that they played in the middle and used to have a tough time guarding.
Yeah.
We played good teams. Those years. That's why, to have 14 consecutive winning seasons, And in the last 14 years I was at Northmont, we were seeded 8th or higher every single year, which means you were one of the 8 best teams in the entire Dayton area, and that's quite a
Oh, it means something.
that's quite an accomplishment. There were a lot of times we were seeded, we were never the top seeded team, but we were 2, a couple times 3. We were in the top 3 or 4 several times. I think the one year you're talking about when Brzezinski and those guys, I think we were the number 2 seed. But we had some really good teams.
Yeah. Could you, if I gave you the choice of everyone, could you pick a starting 5 and mismatch teams?
Yeah,
with a couple subs.
That would be hard. Yeah. Well, I mean, Andrew Parrish Andrew Parrish and Brendan Heaney were the 2 best centers I had. I mean, they. If you could have combined them together in terms of effort and ability, you would have had a really good player. But Kenny Hayes and Ben Ramsey would have to be in there. It's hard.
Yeah, it's tough. I know.
It is. It's really hard because you. I mean, the last 2 years I was there, Keith Richardson and Javon Carter had phenomenal seasons because I didn't have, one of the things you got to do as a high school coach is, as a college coach, you can recruit talent to go to your philosophy. Whatever your philosophy is, you can recruit talent to that. In high school, you're kind of stuck with what you have. So the last 2 years I coached at Northmont, I didn't have inside players. I mean, I just didn't have. They were okay, but I didn't have. But I had good point guards.
Really good guards.
So we ran a lot of point guard offense stuff, and because of their ability and strategically what we tried to do, we were successful. I mean, I won 18 one year, maybe 17 or 18 the other year, and but it was. You have to make adjustments. But those 2 guys were exceptionally good point guards.
Right.
Alex Jones was really good. Brian Toll was a good shooter. I mean, I remember Brian Toll brought him up as a sophomore, and he played. I think he had 12 points in 1 quarter at the over there. At
the final against Roger Bacon, I think. Yeah.
Roger Bacon.
Yeah.
His mom about had a heart attack when
when
I put him in the game in the 4th quarter. She couldn't believe I was doing it.
Yeah.
He had a phenomenal 4th quarter. I don't know how many points he had, but he had every shot.
That's fun.
The Danny Brzezinski, Steve Newell were both really good players. Danny Brzezinski was a 4-year starter at Wittenberg, and so was Steve, and they were both really good high school players. I didn't have many kids go on to college and play. I mean, Stephen went to Wittenberg, Danny Brzezinski went to Wittenberg, Brendan Heaney went to Eastern Kentucky, didn't play a whole lot there. David Diggs went to Marquette. Kenny Hayes went to Miami. Devon Carter went to Shawnee State, had a really good career down there. Keith Richardson went to Marietta. So they, one of the, I think one of the problems at a school like that Northmont, and I don't think Northmont has ever been what you would call a basketball school like. I live in Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek for a long period of time was considered a basketball school.
Yeah.
I mean, the program had success, and young kids were playing basketball. That didn't occur at Northmont. I mean, I think it's a baseball, football type community more so than basketball. So, but I mean, we had some kids that, there might be others. I mean, Corey Bailey. I don't think he went and played college basketball, but certainly Alex Jones did. He went to Ashland, then he went to Shippensburg State, played for his uncle. I had several kids that played football that went on and played football in college. So.
Right. I'll just get the chance to keep playing whatever sport you love. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, sure is.
Coach Ayler, real quick, just because I mean I mean, he was all of our. I mean, we loved him and stuff. He's so funny, even when he's trying to be serious,
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't help but not laugh at. I know you're making a point, Coach, but
Yeah.
I mean, turnovers are on sale at Walmart. I mean,
Yeah.
how am I supposed to not laugh? You know.
Right.
So where'd you? I know you talked about him before. You took him to.
Well,
Northmont.
I was a senior in college at the University of Dayton. I was taking the coaching class, which I still teach at Wright State, and I was taking it from Coach Don Donaher, and.
I think my dad took that class too.
When
he was there.
It was a great class. I mean, it was a great class. And when I took it, just because I was interested in basketball, I really had no aspirations about coaching. I really didn't. I mean, I loved basketball, but I didn't think I was going to. I wanted to be a biology teacher, guidance counselor. That's what I wanted to be. And anyway, I was taking this class, and after one of the classes, Coach Donner approached me about. He had this friend that was looking for a volunteer coach to coach his sophomore team, not his JV team, but it was a team comprised of kids that weren't good enough to make the JV team, but they wanted to keep them in the program. And Fairmont had a team like that. And Jim Mailer was the varsity coach, and he said, "I'd like you to go out there and see if it's something you'd want to do." So I did. I went out and Jim hired me. Of course, I was a volunteer.
Right.
And that was my first experience with him. And I don't know when I always kind of stayed in contact with him. I mean, he was the head coach there at Fairmont for a while. And then he went to Fairmont West as the athletic director, and then he went to Dayton and I had some contact with him when he was assistant with Dayton. He was like he was their scouter. He did a lot of scouting. He didn't do much recruiting. He just was a kind of a scouter. And we stayed in contact. And then when we lost an assistant coach at Wright State, I said something to Coach Underhill about Jim being somebody that, we might think about hiring. So we did. He was with us for 8 years out there. And then he was with me for 14, I think, when he decided to retire, that I lost a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, I was kind of ready to hang it up, and because when you've been together for so long,
right?
Yeah, it was. I had a really good young assistant coach by the name of Stu Hartenstein, and they had an opening at Northmont to hire someone in his field, and they didn't do it, which really, really upset me at the time because I couldn't understand why you wouldn't hire a Northmont student who was interested in being a coach. And so there were some things that happened there at the end that I was disenchanted with. And one, of course, was Jim. I mean, he didn't want to retire, but he was, and then unfortunately, like 2 years later, he died.
Yeah.
And it was sad. It was so sad.
Very.
But he was great. I mean,
Yeah.
he was great. He'd get out on the floor, and I kept telling Jim, "You got to get off the floor. You're going to get run over by people." He was just great with the kids, and I knew he would be. I mean, that's why when I got the job, I felt like, his enthusiasm and his knowledge, the kids would really like him.
Yeah, stories.
They respond to him, and they did. I mean, he was a beaut. I mean, he was.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
I loved
Yeah.
being around him.
Oh yeah, he was his stories. I mean, the knowledge he had, and he was really good. I mean, he recruited Anthony Grant.
Really?
Yeah, he and Jack Butler recruited Anthony Grant.
Okay.
And he would always, when Anthony was the head coach at Alabama, and they would come up and play Vanderbilt or Tennessee, he would go to the game. Anthony would get him tickets.
That's awesome.
Right up until the year he died, he was doing that. Yeah, he was. And he was one of those guys that everybody knew. I mean, everybody knew.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. He was into track. He was a starter in track for years and years and years. So, if you didn't know him through basketball, you knew him through track.
Right.
I mean, everybody knew him. I every once in a while, I run into somebody and they'll ask, did you know? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So as we kind of finish up, I want to talk about like basketball today, and people call it like the 3-point revolution, and everyone's just kind of, as you would say, casting threes, which I kind of find to be very enjoyable. I really like it. How do you feel about it? That big men are not what they used to be, and you can win without a center, oftentimes not even have a center on the court. I mean, do you enjoy watching the NBA now still as much, less?
Well, I don't. I really don't watch the NBA until college basketball's over.
Okay.
It's a different game. I don't think the officiating in the NBA is very good. That
Right.
bothers me. There's a few teams in the NBA I enjoy watching. I enjoy watching the Spurs. I enjoy watching the Celtics. I enjoy watching the Dallas Mavericks because of the way they play. The basketball has changed. I think it's much fun to watch, but there's been an evolution in basketball, and I don't know what has caused it. I mean, you're right. There's very few good centers in the game. The hook shot is like the dinosaur; it's gone. And the all-time leading scorer in the history of professional basketball is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and all he did was shoot a hook shot, and nobody could guard it.
Right.
And it's a mystery to me. Well, it's not a mystery. I understand. It's a very difficult shot to master. So nobody wants to spend the time to master it. And whoever Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's 7th grade coach was, or 8th grade coach, whoever told him or taught him that the hook shot, I mean, that guy made him a lot of money, because that's something that somebody taught him, and then he fell in love with it because he became very proficient with it. You'll see some kids shoot half hooks today, but nobody has a legitimate hook shot.
No.
But the game has changed, and you see this happen. I kind of pat myself on the back sometimes, because I think I was kind of ahead of the curve, because probably 10 years ago I started to certainly the last 4 or 5 years I was at Northmont, I went to a pick and roll offense, and part of it was out of necessity, because I didn't have an inside player and I had good point guards, and I went to a point guard offense, and very few people was running ball screen offense. I mean, nobody was doing it, and I've always felt that the pick and roll is the toughest thing in basketball to defend. I mean, it's very difficult. If it's executed right, it's very difficult to defend. And for everything somebody tries to do against it, there's an option to counter that. So I spent a lot of time in practice practicing that. Well, today, it started in the NBA. And the NBA, because of the 24-second shot clock, they went to a lot of ball screen offense. And then it's gone down to the college level. And what you see today is you see dribble and kick, penetrate and kick, penetrate and kick, get somebody into the lane. And I was watching a game last night, and I'm sure this was a called play. I think it was Western Kentucky was playing somebody, where the kid drove into the lane with no idea, no thought of trying to make a basket, just to get in there, and then he turned, pivoted, and threw it out for a three-point shot.
Right.
And that's, when I was a young player, and even when I played in college, a cross-court pass was taboo. If you threw a cross-court pass, you got yelled at.
Right.
Now it's encouraged. Now they don't call it a cross-court pass, they call it a skip pass.
Right.
So you see these things happen in basketball where the game changes, and I do think that the three-point line needs to be moved out. I do think that is something that they need to do.
Right.
I think they're going to go to quarters in college. I think that's something that needs to be done. And the reason the biggest benefit from that is the fouls, because under the way the women's game is played today,
quarters, right?
Yeah, quarters. Now, the only thing I would like to see differently is, in the women's game, once you commit 5 fouls, all free throws are 2 shots, and I would rather see when you commit the 5th foul, it's a 1-and-1, and maybe when you commit the 7th foul in a quarter, or maybe at the 4th foul. Anyway, leave the 1-and-1 in the mix. But I think going to quarters is a good thing. I do think moving I would be opposed to reducing the shot clock. I think 30 seconds is I don't think you need to reduce it anymore.
Right.
All you're doing, and then in the NBA, you watch an NBA game, and you'll see in a half, you'll see 5 or 6 shots that shouldn't be taken. I mean, it's just simply because the shot clock's winding down, and that's not good. So you have to have a happy medium. And I think 30 seconds, even at 30 seconds, you'll see some shots where the offense doesn't get a good shot, and they're forced to take a bad shot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about widening the lane, but I do think basketball has changed. But we're, we'll they're just, for whatever reason, the reason I think, you're right about there's no centers, and for the life of me, I don't understand why there aren't more. But it's obvious that you can win a national championship, you can win a state championship in basketball, and not have what is called a legitimate center.
Yeah.
If you've got 6'8" in college or 6'6" forwards in high school, you can. Now it helps.
Right.
It helps if you have a pivot man. I've always said to be successful, to have a really good basketball team, is you got to have good guards. You got to have guards dictate how successful you're going to be. And you look at the teams that are left. Mm-hmm. Loyola, 2 really good guards that can shoot.
Yeah.
Villanova, really good guard that can shoot. Kansas, 2 or 3 really good guards that can shoot.
Yeah.
Michigan, a couple guards, maybe a little less. But, I mean, you look at the teams that make it, high school, college, whatever, pros, the guards are so important.
Right.
They're hard to guard. I mean, you can't double team them. A pivot man, a center, you can double team, take the ball out of it, and neutralize him that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard. And even in the NBA, the game has changed. I mean, it's and I don't see any, I don't think it's any less interesting to watch.
Right.
I mean, I'm a big college basketball fan because that's where the thing about college basketball that I think needs to be corrected is this: what do you do with these one and done players? I mean, in a perfect world, what I'd like to see happen, if a kid wants to go to the NBA out of high school, let him go. But once he doesn't do that, then he must stay in college. I would like to see it for 3 years, like it is in football, like it is in baseball. I don't think that's going to happen anytime.
I don't think so either. Right?
I think maybe 2 years we might get that passed.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand why the NBA is opposed to that. The Players Association, from what I understand, is the roadblock. But I don't know. But in a perfect world, it would be nice. Okay, you can go to the NBA right out of high school. But if you don't do that, then you have to wait 3 years before you can. I think that would be great. I think it would help college basketball. I think it would help the NBA. Because let's be honest, free agency is really hurt. I'm not opposed to free agency and it's pro sports, but what it's done is it's hurt this relationship between the fan and the team, because it's hard to keep track of who's on your team.
Yeah.
Because for the casual fan, you may know, like if you're a Cincinnati Reds fan,
right,
you know who's on the Cincinnati Reds team.
Right.
It used to be when I was a kid, I knew who was on the Dodgers team, I knew who was on the Cardinals team. I couldn't name 3 guys on some of these other teams today because they flip around. In the same way in pro football, it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping track, and I think that's bad, but I understand it. It's not going to change. That's what we have, and and you have a little bit of that in college sports today with the transfers. I mean, you have 46% of all Division I basketball players transfer.
Just nuts, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And there's a lot of things that enter into that. I mean, there's a lot of things. I think AAU has a little bit to do with it, because kids start out at an early age. They get on the AAU team. If things don't work out, they just go to another one. There's no accountability. They just flip-flop and go. In high school, transfers are accepted now. And so and I think coaches are to blame here too, because they're under a lot of pressure. So if they recruit a kid and it doesn't work out, they just, hey, you need to find another school. I think a lot of that goes on.
Yep.
I think that started primarily in football, but boy, it's gone to basketball big time. And then you have this immediate gratification from some kids. I mean, and I always, when I had this happen in college, I would always talk to the player. He comes in as a freshman and doesn't understand why he's not playing. Well, I said, did you play on the varsity as a freshman in high school?
Right.
And most of them don't. And it's just if you're playing all freshmen at the college or high school level, your team's probably not very good. It's when you have juniors and seniors that are playing.
Yeah.
But that's changed. That's why I'm kind of happy that these programs, and Kentucky and Duke come to mind primarily, that have gone to one and done type of stuff, haven't had success. I mean, they win during the regular season, but when it comes to tournament time and they're playing against experienced teams, the experienced teams are beating them.
Yep.
And I think that's good. I mean, I really do.
Yeah.
I think it kind of. But I don't blame either one of those coaches for doing it. I mean,
no, it's hard. It'd be hard for a coach to turn down talent. I mean, it is.
Yeah,
but,
it is. It's just, but it's difficult for the fan base. I just, because you can't. Part of being a college fan is following a player for several years, and you don't really you do it in football. I mean, in football they're there for 3 years, so like if he's the good quarterback, you follow him for 3 years, or running back or whatever.
Right.
College basketball, you can't.
Right, and I mean, you never fault a kid for leaving after wanting to go to the NBA. If you're that good, go ahead. But at a mid-major, my family's season tickets to Dayton, and like a player like Scoochie Smith means so much to the fans because he was no one heard of him in recruiting. Played a little bit as a freshman, then as a 3-year captain, and the same thing with I'm sure countless Wright State players. When you see a kid for 4 years, they grow up.
Yeah, you watch them grow up, and they become a part of your fan base and your loyalty and all that, and it's totally disappeared at Kentucky, and it's getting that way at Duke. I mean, they had Grayson Allen this year, but everybody else was a freshman, and 2 of those guys are definitely going to leave, maybe a third. Same way at Kentucky. I mean, so you're starting all over, and I just think that's a tough sell from a coaching standpoint, and it's really a tough sell from the fans.
Yeah. Well, and you're how many years coaching in college?
27 in college,
and then
43 years.
Right, and then being a fan, can you? Because I know there's football coaches who are I call very schematically sound and very good coaches, and I find I love basketball watches as much as anyone, but sometimes I don't understand who's running great sets or great scheme. Who are you can go from whenever to the present day. I mean, who have been some coaches that you're like, okay, that I need to steal his stuff, or I need to get with that coach to learn X's and O's.
This guy has retired, but Dick Bennett, Tony Bennett, the current coach at Virginia, his dad was at Green Bay. We played against him several years. He was a very, very good coach, very sound. Bob Huggins, when he was at Akron, Bob Huggins, I can remember playing against them the first time, and I thought, my God, they run good stuff. They're well coached. Now he's kind of gotten away. He's kind of changed his philosophy. He's gone to full court pressing.
Right.
He didn't do that as a young coach. I think
I had no idea he was at Akron.
Yeah, he was. He started at Walsh.
Okay.
And then he went to Akron, and then went to Cincinnati, and then to West Virginia. I think currently, right now, I love Bill Self. I think Bill Self has done I think he's the most underappreciated coach in America, and that's because he's out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. That guy, what he has done. Yeah. And this year is a perfect example of why I think he's such a great coach, is because he's adjusted. I mean, I used to run his high-low offense. I got it. If you have a couple of post players, you can run it. But a lot of the stuff I was running my last years at Northmont was Bill Self type stuff. Okay. And the adjustment that he's made as a coach, because he doesn't have 2 inside players, he's got perimeter. He's gone to a 3-point offense. Yep. I think he's an outstanding coach. Jay Wright at Villanova is a really good coach. I think Don Donaher was a great coach. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that fly under the radar because they're just not at a big time school. It's sort of like they have this deal, which I don't subscribe to, that unless you've won a Super Bowl, you can't be put in the category of a great player. And
it's just ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Like Charles Barkley never won a NBA championship. Okay, right. So people say, well, Charles Barkley can't be considered a great all-time player, or Dan Marino in football. Or I mean, that is so far. Basketball, football, they're team sports.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of coaches that, because they're not high-profile coaches that can really coach.
Right.
I always felt like when you play against somebody, you coach against somebody, it's like Bob Huggins, for example. I mean, he was kind of flamboyant and everything, and I can remember that's kind of the way he was. And when we played against him the first couple of times, because we played him when he was at Akron, we played them. My goodness, this guy can coach. I mean, what he does, the offense he runs. Coach Underhill, a guy I coached with for years, was a great coach. I can remember when he first got the job at Wright State, he told me, we're going to press when they get off the bus. We're going to ask, oh, come on, Ralph. You know, it just, that sounds good. But he was convinced of it. And I can remember in his first year at Wright State, we were going down to play Miami of Ohio, which was coached by Darrell Hedrick. And Miami was very disciplined, very well coached. And I told Ralph, I said, we can't press these guys. They're too good. Jim, we're pressing them. So we pressed them. We pressed them the whole game. Never gave up a layup to speak of, but never get any steals.
Okay.
Just we were pressing, but we weren't getting anything out of it. So it gets down to, there's about 2 minutes to go in the game, and we're down 6 points. And we're shooting a 1-and-1, and our kid makes both free throws to cut it to 4. They take the ball out of bounds. We steal the inbounds pass and get a layup, cut it to 2. And then we get a 10-second count. They can't get it across a 10-second. We score again. Now the score's tied, and they're in Panicsville, and we steal it again and make it. And so we, in a matter of a minute and 10 seconds, it went from a 6-point deficit to a 4-point lead. We scored 10 straight points. And I said, my gosh, it made a believer out of me. And so one of the things, I think, there's so many, and I try to tell my coaching class this, there's so many ways to skin a cat. I can remember in the 80s, if you were a college coach and you played zone defense, you were told you can't win. Bobby Knight,
Right.
Bobby Knight was the disciple, Indiana, man-to-man, Krzyzewski at Duke, man-to-man.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can win. And then a guy by the name of Judd Heathcote at Michigan State, and this was in 1981 or 79, whatever it was, he plays zone, and he wins a national championship. It still didn't convince people.
Right.
People still said, no, you can't win playing man-to-man.
Would you say that they won because he had Magic Johnson or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look today at what's going on in college basketball is you see a lot of coaches that in previous years would never play zone defense that are now playing zone defense. And here's the reason why I'm a huge believer in playing zone defense. As you know, we played a lot of them when we were coaching at Northmont. I'm not saying it's the only defense to play, but I think I can't tell you how many times in my coaching career we either started in man-to-man or we started in a zone and we switched to another zone, and it changed the whole game. Just changed the whole game. The other team didn't know. They couldn't figure it out. They didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's really funny to me. That's why I love to watch Syracuse, because Syracuse plays 40 minutes of zone defense.
Right.
He doesn't care who he's playing against. He plays 40 minutes of zone defense. Georgia State has a guy by the name of Ron Hunter. He's never played any man-to-man defense in his career. Now you got Mike Krzyzewski.
How about that? Duke playing his own
Duke
and
playing
stuff.
his own defense and having success with it. There are more and more coaches that are playing zone defense. Now, there's still some stick in the mud guys that stick to their man-to-man and will only play man-to-man defense. And in a lot of cases, John, it's because they don't feel comfortable teaching it. They just don't feel comfortable teaching it. And the year we won the national championship at Wright State, we played a zone defense. And if we'd have tried to play man-to-man that game, we'd have never won.
Right.
But my point was whatever you can do as a coach to make the other team take practice time to prepare for you, I think is an advantageous thing for you.
For sure.
So,
Yeah.
so if you're playing against a team that all they do is play man to man,
Mm-hmm.
well, in practice, all they do is practice against man to man.
Right.
They don't ever practice against the zone
Yep.
unless they're going to play somebody that plays zone. Then they might spend some time on it. So, if you're playing a team and they know they're playing you and you're going to full court press them some and you're going to play some zone, they're going to have to spend time in practice preparing for that. Well,
Definitely,
that's taking time away from either shooting or working on their offensive execution, or you're taking time away from that. So that's why I've always been a huge believer in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the downside to it is I can remember some of my friends would criticize us because we full court pressed, and they said, well, your half court defense isn't going to be as good because, and that's true. I mean, you can only spend so much time in practice, but then, I felt like the benefits from doing that outweighed the negative things.
Right.
And
you make the other team uncomfortable.
Yeah, because that's half of it. And
Yeah.
once you do that, then you've accomplished something.
Right. Question from my buddy Nate, who's almost a doctor.
Oh yeah,
now,
I
by
know.
the
That's
way.
great what he's done.
Yeah. He said, how many free throws out of 100 could you hit?
Oh well, I haven't shot him in a long time.
No?
But that's so funny because when they used to have an intramural championship out at Wright State.
Yeah.
And you shot 100 free throws, and I won that like 6 years in a row.
Did you?
Yeah.
What was the highest you ever hit?
Oh, I had 99 out of 100.
No way.
Growing up as a kid, my mom played basketball in high school, and she always told the story about they were playing in the district championship game, and they went like 2 overtimes, and the coaches decided that they would just take a player off each team and shoot free throws to see who won the game. And Mom made more than the other, and they won the game. And she always told me that she made 48 out of 50. And I, as a young kid, I can't tell you how many times I went out in the backyard trying to make 48 out of 50. And the day I made that, I mean, I ran in the house. I was jumping and everything. But I was never a great free throw shooter in high school. I shot like 72, 73%. But when so much of free throw shooting is just confidence.
Yeah.
It's just confidence. Yeah. And anyway, they had this free throw shooting contest, and I'd go down. Some days I did it in my street shoes. Mm-hmm. And I won it like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years in a row. And it would amaze me. And I wouldn't practice them a whole lot, but as I got older, I think so much of it's just confidence.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm too old now.
A couple times at practice, I remember you shooting.
Oh, I would. I mean, I can remember one day I was walking out of the gym. I was walking toward Robin Spiller's office, and a ball was bouncing to me, and I took a hook shot and swished.
Yeah.
And I don't know who it was, but the kid says, "You can't do that again, Coach Brown." And he threw me the ball, and I swished it again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was. I just kept walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just walk off after that.
That's one thing I could always shoot.
Yeah.
I mean, I did. My best friend in high school, he says my left arm is longer than my right because I shot the ball so much.
That's funny.
But I did. I mean, I could shoot it in high school.
Yeah. Well, Nate's the biggest Dirk Nowitzki fan there is. Can you tell us the Dirk Nowitzki recruiting story?
Oh yeah.
You once told us?
We on 2 different occasions we took our basketball team to Europe, and the first time we went, our Wright State basketball team.
Yeah.
The first time we went to what it was if you would play a foreign team in an exhibition game, and you did that for 3 years, then in return for that, you would get an all expenses paid trip to Europe. So if you would bring a European team over, I don't know, you have to give them $3,000 or $4,000. They played a home game, an exhibition game, and then every 4 years you could take a trip to Europe. So we took a trip to Europe, and we went to Holland. We were in Holland for a week. We were in Germany for a week, and we were in Belgium, and then went to Paris, France. Ended our trip. We were gone 24 days, which is way too long.
Yeah.
But we played like 12 games. So anyway, when we did that, I developed a relationship with this guy from Holland. His name was Vladimir Hager. And so we ended up recruiting several players from Europe. Well, Coach Underhill one year went over there to watch. He went over for a recruiting trip, but he also went over to watch some tournaments. And he saw this kid, Dirk Nowitzki, and he called me on the phone, and he said, "Jim, I just saw the next Larry Bird. This guy's unbelievable." And he says, "I've got his information. I want you to call him." So I called him on the phone, and he answered, and he could talk. I could understand what he was saying.
Yeah.
He spoke English, which was a lot of times was difficult because sometimes you'd make those phone calls and they couldn't speak English. But he spoke English, and I started talking to him about Wright State, and he listened to me. He was very pleasant and everything. He says, "Coach," he says, "I appreciate the call, but I'm not going to leave Germany. I like Germany. I'm playing on a good team, and this and that." And so on, and so fine. So I hung up, but I thought, I waited about 2 months. I called back, called him again. I thought, I'm going to try again. So, and it was pretty much the same thing. I mean, he remembered me and remembered the call, and so anyway, fast forward about 4 years. I'm sitting right in there, living room, watching the NBA draft, and comes on the screen. I was like the 12th pick. The Milwaukee Bucks select Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah.
And I sat right up in my chair. I couldn't believe what I just heard. I called Coach Underhill on the phone. I said, "Ralph, you're not going to believe this. You remember that kid we talked to from Germany, Dirk Nowitzki? He just got drafted. He was the 12th player picked in the draft."
How about that?
And he didn't sign. He stayed in Germany.
Okay.
He
yeah.
wouldn't, and at that time, when you drafted a player, you had his rights until the next draft. Now you've got it forever, but at that time you only had it for 1 year.
Okay.
So the night before the next draft, he was traded to the Dallas Mavericks, and the Dallas Mavericks signed him.
How about that? How about that? And he's still playing. He's
Yes.
he's in the top 10 all-time scorers
Said
ever.
he's going to play, and is he a lot like Larry Bird?
No,
I
very
mean,
much so.
You think back to. And another story, we had Vitaly Potapenko in our program. He was from Kiev in the Ukraine, and he had just finished his sophomore year at Wright State, and I got a phone call from a coach, who had another player that wanted to come to the United States, and he was 7 foot tall. His name was Zydrunas Gagauskas, and he says he wants to come to the United States and play 1 year and go to the NBA draft. And he said, we called the University of Minnesota because they had a player from Russia on their team, but they don't have a scholarship. And I know you got Vitaly Potapenko. Would you guys be interested? And I said, sure, we'd be interested. We have a scholarship. So we started the process of getting him all the paperwork and everything. And everything was going fine.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him. I was just, taking him because of what this guy said.
Yeah.
He was an NBA prospect. He was 7'1". And I did some other checking, found out he was pretty darn good.
Right.
And it was about 2 weeks before, might have been 3 weeks. It was in early August. He called me on the phone. He says, "Coach, I got some bad news. He's broken his foot and he's not going to be able to play. He's not going to be able to come." And if you remember then, the Cavaliers drafted him. I always ask this trivia question because Vitaly was the 12th player picked.
Okay.
Zydrunas was the 14th player picked. Who was picked in between the two?
What year? Do you know what year it was? And I'll be able to guess.
It would have been, you'll never guess.
Is it Kobe?
Yeah, it is
Okay.
Kobe.
Well, the only reason I know, he was in like the teens or something like that.
Yeah, Kobe Bryant
Wow.
was the 13th player picked. And Zydrunas Gagauskas, when he came, he was drafted, he had to have microfracture surgery on his foot. They didn't know if he was ever going to be able to play.
Wow.
And he had that, and it was successful. And he played for like 17, 18 years.
Long time.
Yeah. But I've thought many times about, my God, if we'd had him and Vitaly, who knows? I mean, who knows what kind of team we would have had?
Right.
I mean,
You kidding me? Wright State with 2 of the top 14 picks.
Yeah, but we had a lot of success recruiting in Europe, and now you look at teams and just about everybody's got a European player. I mean, just about everybody. Some of them got 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And when we were doing it, Valparaiso and George Washington, those are the only 2 schools that, if you would call over there about a player, never happened. Like Marco Picard that played at UD, I brought him over here
Okay.
as a high school player.
Yeah.
And then we decided not to recruit him. We didn't think he was good enough, and he went to UD, and
Yeah.
he didn't play much there. I brought another kid over too, but he ended up going to a small school down in West Virginia. But I mean, I developed a friendship with Vladimir, and you know, we ended up getting 5 or 6 total players out of the whole deal.
Nice.
You know,
That's pretty cool. I mean, like you said, a lot of teams are.
and now you can't bring a foreign team over and play them.
You have to go over there, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to go over there. What happened was I think it was Calipari. It was he brought these. He would bring them over with the idea of recruiting them. I mean, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was him. So now they've outlawed it.
Right.
You can't play a foreign team. You could go over there and play a foreign team, but you can't play one here.
Yeah. No, I always looked at, I'm coaching football, and you see the basketball team gets to go overseas for like a couple weeks and play. I'm like, man, that'd be nice.
You can do it every 4 years. And we went to Sweden, and we were only there 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's great because you can practice you can have like 10 practices in preparation to go. I mean, both times we did it, the following season we were really good.
Okay.
Really good.
Yeah. You feel like, I mean, the team bonded a little bit too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first time we went, that 24-day thing, we came back, we went to the NCAA tournament that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the another time we did it, we won 22 straight games. Yeah, we had, it was well worth it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, the last thing, now you're the voice of the Raiders.
Yeah.
It seems like calling broadcasting for
It's
games.
fun. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. How many years now?
This is I just finished my 3rd full season.
Okay.
What happened was Tom Michaels, who's a good friend of mine, was doing games for a Piqua radio station. He was doing high school games, and the last year I was at Northmont, he called me at the end of the season, wanted to know if I'd go up to the state tournament and do the Troy Christian game, because Troy Christian was in the state tournament. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I went up and I did the game, and we're driving back to Dayton, and he says, you know, I know you're still coaching, but and he said, when you give up coaching, I would love to have you, you know, do games with me. And I said, okay. So anyway, as thing would happen, that was it. I didn't coach after that, and he called me, and so I was doing some high school games with him, and Wright State found out I was doing them, and they approached me about doing Wright State games, and so I think I did like 12 at the end of the season,
Mm-hmm.
and then I've done them ever since. It's
Yeah.
fun. It keeps me around the players. I really like this coaching staff. I think they're going to be good for some time now. They got some good young players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched the tournament game against Tennessee, and they, you know, starting line before the game, it's 1 senior and all underclassmen.
Yeah,
So
yeah, they have 3. They signed 4 kids. 2 of them won state championships. They're all good players.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all really good players. They had 2 kids sitting out, so they're going to be good. But it's fun. I mean, I enjoy it. It keeps me involved in the game. People have been really, really nice in terms of they really appreciate me doing it. So it's fun.
Yeah. Well, I know Dad will call me on the way home from something. And be like, you never believe what Coach Brown just said. I'm like, I bet you I've heard it before. And most of the time I have from practice or something. But that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun. I mean, you have to travel some, which is tough.
Yeah. Oh, but in going to the NCAA tournament, like even as a fan, I've been to tournament games, and it's
different.
it's so much fun.
Yeah, it is. I hadn't been one in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We were in '93, and I had forgotten what it was really like. But it was a cool deal.
Yeah.
And that arena down there.
Where's the game?
Dallas.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, is that some arena? I mean, I've been in a lot of arenas. That was spectacular, and you park underneath it. I mean, you drive down to the parking lot. bring the buses down. There must have been 10 buses down there.
Wow.
And there's all kinds of cars, underneath the arena.
Just right underneath there.
And it's an absolute gorgeous arena with every amenity that you can imagine. I mean, just it's they have a hockey team there and a basketball team, but
Right.
I've been in a lot of arenas. That place was something else.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. I don't think I have anything else. Anything
All
else
right.
you want to hit?
No, it's
Good.
fun.
I appreciate you talking.
Yep, no problem.
All right.
Glad to help you out.
Thanks.